A meeting was held in the castle of the Northern Conference Hall in Liance, attended by the main representatives of the state of Rohan. On the agenda was the question of what the emperor planned to do about Lichten's provocation. He asked whether this was the first provocation from this country. All the representatives waited impatiently, knowing that the emperor had a harsh temperament and was cruel towards other states. It would have cost him nothing to start a war. It would not have been the first one he had started since his coronation. The emperor thought, pondering the current situation after all, this was the first time. Duke of the East Limal recalled that the country is completely new and its government does not yet understand what it is doing, and in addition, it is being incited by two neighboring states. Seth, Duke of the West, advocated teaching them a lesson so that they would never even think of doing something like that again. However, the emperor said that everything should be left as it was, which greatly surprised his interlocutors. They decided to remind him that otherwise there would be unrest among the neighboring countries. However, the emperor firmly insisted on his own and said that in this case, they would simply burn all the countries together. Here, his interlocutors realized that he was not joking at all, and that this way it would be easier for him to resolve the issue in one fell swoop. It became clear that the emperor had not lost his grip at all and was ready to fight, but only on a large scale. Duke Seth noted that the Duchess of the North had not expressed her opinion, and then suggested that she voice it. Although she represented the North unofficially, she was also asked to take an interest in state affairs. Moreover, the Duke of the South was now on the battlefield, and it was necessary to take responsibility for him, too. The Duchess held something white in her hands, but not everyone understood what it really was, and yet no one tried to ask questions. She represented her late husband and knew that she was not expected to be particularly knowledgeable about the country's affairs. Having answered something vague, she launched the conversation into a philosophical direction, after which the emperor decided to end it. When he dismissed everyone, Catherine decided to leave the negotiating room as well. However, before she stood up, the emperor's hand appeared on the table in front of her. She asked what was bothering His Majesty, and he decided to find out if she had any questions for him. At the same time, he looked at her so intently with his bright red eyes, which were a distinctive feature of the representatives of the ruling family. Her eyes were also distinguished by their violet color, which was also very rare in the country and caused the envy of many women of noble birth. The Duchess decided to clarify whether the emperor's question concerned his younger sister. This is not what the emperor meant at all, but he decided to express his opinion on this issue anyway. After all, Haniel went with Rome, the emperor's brother, who was distinguished by the presence of magical powers. Even though contact with them was lost, it could be concluded that the little princess was alive, since the pearl stone did not change its color. Holding the little white bundle tenderly in her hands, the Duchess noted that the princess was indeed safe. The emperor's voice changed as he said that if something happened to Haniel, he would not leave it. He promised that he would immediately kill anyone who dared to approach or harm the smallest representative of his family. His plans were particularly bloodthirsty. He promised that he would break all the bones and tear off all the flesh from anyone who dared to harm the princess and raise his head himself so that he could see his flayed flesh. The Duchess giggled nervously. She had not expected such an answer, which was distinguished by its particular detail. Here the emperor suddenly asked why Catherine's hands were shaking so much, to which she replied, trying to hide her fear, that she was simply cold. After which she asked permission to go home, but the emperor stopped her. He said that it was raining outside, which she didn't like, and she shouldn't go home considering that she was already cold. The emperor did not ask, but rather ordered her to stay in this castle, noting that he would order a place to rest to be prepared for her. The prolonged rain, which apparently would not end soon, played into his hands, and she could not resist the order of the head of state. Therefore, she simply thanked him for his concern, after which she tried to look carefree. Finally, he too left the negotiating room, giving her a chance to breathe. She opened her palms to reveal a small signet and told him that it looked like the baby's brother was planning to kill her. However, it all started not here, but much earlier, when Catherine had a completely different life. In it, she was very fond of fantasy novels, especially about the transmigration of souls. It was so cool, you just open your eyes and wake up as some princess or queen. She herself worked as a temporary employee at the zoo, replacing an employee who fell ill for a long period. She loved working with animals, knowing full well that this could never happen in real life. When she looked at the swans floating by, she wanted the same life, because they lived quietly and peacefully. She was just thinking about it when something completely unexpected happened to her. She was suddenly sucked into the water and could not get out, despite struggling and trying to save herself with all her might. The abyss was drawing her in faster and faster. She was powerless to change anything, preparing for inevitable death. Still trying to pull her hands out, she tried to get out, but it was no longer destined to happen. And so she sat up in bed feeling more than just strange. At first, it just seemed to her that she had fallen asleep, and everything that had happened was just a dream. However, she looked around her and noted that the whole situation around her seemed rather strange to her. It was incredible, but she was lying in a huge bed that definitely couldn't belong to her. Approaching the mirror, she wondered if this was really the same transformation, because a completely different girl was looking at her. She had black hair with a blue tint and mysterious purple eyes. She simply didn't know how to describe this insane beauty, because it was so beautiful that she couldn't imagine it. Various pictures of her future life began to spin in her head. She could turn the head of some prince and marry him, and even run away from a boring rich admirer to meet adventures, or become a student of a powerful magician and turn the world upside down. Whatever happened, it was going to be very interesting, she thought, hoping that her new life would bring her many impressions. However, she wanted to know at least a little bit about the plot, and to do this she needed to understand what book she was in. An hour after the transformation, she still didn't know what to expect and was a little depressed. Afterwards, she thought that perhaps things weren't so good if she had to drown in the lake to do it. But then she pulled herself together and decided to try moving her fingers in case there was magical power hidden in them. She even examined her entire body for signs of any magical properties. But looking in the mirror, she thought only about how beautiful she really was now. After which I noticed that such beauty could have been decorated with lighter and more elegant clothes, and not with the black dress that she was wearing. However, here she began to realize that in this life too she was a failure, judging by her wardrobe. At first, she still tried to think that she had ended up in some kind of fairy tale, and that black things just looked good on a witch. However, with each passing moment it became clearer that there would not be as much entertainment in this life as she would like. Opening the closet doors, she realized that this really did not bode well for her. And you shouldn't hope to meet a prince or a rich admirer. Apparently this happened earlier, because all the clothes in her closet were exclusively black. Besides dresses, there were a lot of hats which also did not differ in variety, and a lot of black shoes, which will apparently become her only available footwear for a long time. She immediately decided to simply close the closet so as not to upset herself, since she had not yet figured out which book it was from. So I decided it was time to go outside to meet at least someone and find out the truth and the current situation. In books, there is usually some character who tells what happened, but not even a fly appeared in front of her. She even thought that perhaps she was a villain who had been abandoned by all people because of her bad character. Catherine left the room and found herself in a large corridor where there was not a soul. She started calling, but no one answered. There was no one around. The new convert really hoped that she had not ended up in a thriller, and that this was not a house of horrors. Otherwise, it would simply be terrible. She would not be able to bear it. She ran away from the huge castle, hoping that at least on the street she would be able to meet at least one living soul. However, something incredibly beautiful caught her eye. She just froze, enjoying the amazing view, not expecting anyone to be able to see her. There was a beautiful glow from the setting sun all around, which colored her black outfit in bright colors. She really did end up in a fantasy book because ordinary nature is not so colorful. In front of her was a magnificent lake, so beautiful that it seemed to be the work of a great artist. Catherine looked around with affection, trying to absorb all the beauty as deeply and strongly as possible. However, then she heard a sharp cry and a slap, as if something had fallen to the ground. She turned around and saw a basket of clean towels lying nearby. Catherine thought that finally someone had appeared who would tell her about what was happening, and turned to the girl dressed in a maid's uniform. She asked her who she had become, a lady or a princess, what she was like. However, she suddenly simply grabbed her face with her hands and screamed terribly, as if she had seen a monster. She did not expect to see such surprise. It corresponds to the book description. Catherine decided to ask if there was something wrong with her face, but the dumbfounded maid either did not understand her language or simply could not answer. As a result, she abandoned the laundry basket and simply ran away without explaining anything. The girl, resurrected in someone else's body, tried to stop her, but it turned out to be an impossible task. Even constant apologies could not make the maid stop. It was getting dark. She needed to quickly find out where she was. She rushed after the girl, however. It turned out to be a futile undertaking. She realized that she would most likely have to go to this house alone, and she really didn't want to do that. Although there was still a chance that there were other people there, then she wouldn't be so scared and lonely. But at one point, she felt that it was becoming more and more difficult for her to walk with every step. Her legs seemed to become heavier. She felt that she could not continue on her way, and there was some other new, unfamiliar feeling. It was as if something light and fluffy surrounded her. It calmed and enveloped her. At the same time, there was a feeling of comfort, fluffiness, and coziness, which reminded me of something. She suddenly realized that she was transforming and would no longer be human. She was becoming something else. The fluff grew larger and larger and began to take on a special shape. Catherine had no idea what was happening, but she had a beak and wings. The fluff surrounded her, turning her into something incomprehensible. It was something incredible, but she realized that she had become a swan, just as she had dreamed. Looking at her reflection in the lake, she saw that she was still human, but now she was in the form of a swan. Then she heard someone's footsteps, and she saw a foot in an elegant shoe. Soon a girl appeared, but it was still unclear who she was. But she apparently understood everything, and she rudely told the newly converted swan that she asked him not to stick his head out. After which I called her Mom. Now the picture began to take shape, more or less. The heroine finally understood what kind of book she had ended up in and what awaited her in the future. Her name was Catherine. She was the daughter of a baron who lived on the outskirts. Her father died early, and her stepmother, who had squandered her fortune on luxury, eventually sold her. She married her off to an older man who paid a large ransom for her. And he was not a debauchee and not a madman, but a real duke. However, she did not have to rejoice for long, because the Duke of Evendale, the ruler of the northern lands of the empire, died on the very first night. Moreover, judging by the expression on the face of the servant who told her this news, there was no certainty that Catherine had married a living man. The Duke, who had been seriously wounded in the last war, had no wife, but 2 daughters. The eldest, Lady Rana, thanks to her outstanding abilities, ruled the north in her father's stead for several years. The youngest daughter, Rebecca, preferred pleasure and did not interfere with her sister's power in any way. However, after it became known that her father was dying, Rana began to have problems. According to imperial law, the title and property passed to the son. Thus, the many years of efforts of the Duke's eldest daughter could have been wasted. However, a clever lady found a loophole in the law, since if there is a widow of a duke, all inheritance is postponed for a year. Initially, this year is given to a widow in case she might have a posthumous child. However, if during this time she finds herself a spouse, the game will be over. Of course, this does not happen automatically, and all rights must be officially transferred by the stepmother. This means that the stepmother cannot be just anyone, but Catherine's birth family, who were very poor, decided to give her away without regret. And although the cunning lady chose her as a stepmother with such care, she still put a curse on her to be on the safe side. The book said that the new stepmother was so shocked by her husband's death that she fell ill and could not leave the house. Therefore, the Duke's eldest daughter had to take her place in order to fulfill state obligations. At the same time, no one doubted her words, since she had been the absolute ruler of the North for several years, and her words were the law and the truth. Considering that she was able to cast a spell on her stepmother, she was probably capable of black magic as well. Thus, the newly minted Catherine realized that she was not in the best position now, as she had been before. However, according to the spell, she could be the beautiful Catherine during the day, but with the onset of night, she turned into a black swan. Moreover, this happened after contact with moonlight, which could not be changed in any way. Therefore, she could not risk going outside so as not to frighten people. And even if she tried to escape, turning into a black swan might be too dangerous. In the end, Catherine did find the informant of this world. It was the duck Selena. As a result, she completely adapted to the life of a black swan, which, of course, the smart lady did not foresee. Moreover, she understood that this was exactly the quiet life she had always dreamed of. In this lake, she was a perfect queen. Besides, half of the inhabitants of the lake are people cursed by that very lady. Even earlier, she asked Selena to find out something about people who interested her. Catherine began to understand that she was not the main character of this story, but she still could not fully remember which book she ended up in. Although it seemed to her that it didn't matter anymore, at that moment they saw Rebecca heading their way. The Duke's second daughter was no better than the first, but she was not as capable. She could be feared less, since she could not cause much harm. She came to make fun of her new stepmother. When they met, she asked if she really liked this kind of life, because she was deeply convinced that she would not be able to adapt. Catherine answered her insolently, but she threatened to ask her sister to leave her as a swan forever. To which Catherine replied that then she and her sister would have a hard time, since they sometimes needed the Duchess of Evendale. All that the newly minted widow has left is her insolence. At the same time, Rebecca still called her stepmother Mommy, so that everything would look natural in front of people. This was somewhat disgusting to Catherine, but she knew that she could not change anything now. As she left, Rebecca threatened to make sure that Catherine remained an animal forever. At first, Catherine thought about running away and finding a magician who could remove the curse. However, she was told that 2 ducks once tried to escape and reached the wizard's house, after which they simply turned into snails. So she put the thought aside. Rebecca's visit always put her in a bad mood. Selena was a maid. She was the first to realize that the handsome young man from the caravan was a black magician, and for this she was cursed. She tried to calm Catherine down, as this was not the first time she had behaved this way. Everything was supposed to change if this girl was her daughter. However, Catherine understood that she was unlucky with her children. One was a psychopath, the other was a malicious, envious woman. And in his past life, he had no parents, no brothers, no sisters, so she always dreamed of being in a family. However, she was unable to get the kind of daughter she wanted, gentle, sweet, soft. In reality, she got 2 bitches who used her for their own purposes. So she lived in the form of a swan, feeding on fish like the other ducks. And recently Selena caught a fish, and it turned out that it was a bewitched man. During the conversation, Catherine heard some sound and asked Selena to be quiet. In the reeds, she heard some noise that was completely unfamiliar to her. She called out loudly to see who was there and could eavesdrop on their conversation. Parting the reeds, she saw a small white swan. He was definitely afraid of them, but neither Selena nor Catherine knew where this baby came from. He had beautiful scarlet eyes, and in appearance he looked like those swans whose life Catherine had previously dreamed of. Moreover, it seemed that this swan chick had been born only recently, which meant that it had gotten lost. Catherine wondered if his mother might be looking for him, but she didn't know who it could be. He looked quite scared, which was understandable given his young age. There were only 2 swans on the lake, Lord Remington and his wife, but they quarreled so often that it was unlikely that they could have a child. The lake was believed to be cursed, but this does not mean that it is always sad or calm there. All the transformed people behaved like animals because they did not know whether they could become human again. Catherine and Selena decided it would be best to ask the couple if they had ever lost their baby. However, first he still needed to be calmed down, since at the moment he was too scared. Selena noticed that Catherine was even more excited because she had never seen such cute babies before. She immediately understood this from her behavior. Nothing could be hidden from her. Catherine was simply melting. She hadn't seen pretty children for so long. Apparently, it was a newborn swan. Since it still did not speak, if it were a person under a curse, it would be able to respond. Both decided that even with all her meanness, Rana could not curse a small child. Selena noticed that the sun would soon set, so she needed to take this little one to the meadow at the edge of the lake. If he were left here, he might be attacked by dogs and would not survive the night. Catherine had already picked up the baby, saying that she would do it herself because Selena had business. She needed to clear away the reeds. Catherine decided that she would take him with her to the castle to keep him out of trouble. But first she decided to make sure there was no one around so they wouldn't see the baby. She spoke to him tenderly, although he did not answer her, but she enjoyed messing around there so much. It was a very cute swan, and his charm simply drove her crazy. She asked him where his mother had gone, but received no answer. Then she noticed how beautiful his eyes were, transparent like rubies. She had never met anyone like them, although usually swans have black eyes. She was still convinced that if it were a man under a curse, he would have told her something by now. Catherine thought that maybe this baby was just a mutant. He was neither human nor animal. And then it would be understandable why his mother left him alone. However, she did not understand how it was possible to leave such a cute swan unattended. Even though she dreamed of living as a swan, life on the lake was still lonely for her. There were completely different views around her. She didn't feel like she was in a family with anyone. Previously, it had been painful for her to return to the mansion, but now she didn't even think about it. Today, she felt better. Looking at the swan, she realized that it seemed to want to sleep. Approaching the window, she realized that the moon was already coming out. It was time for her to transform. The shadow of the swan was already standing behind her. The time had come. In the last minutes before the transformation, she thought that her wish had come true again. She now had a family. However, she hoped that this was not a dream, and now she would have company. She hugged the child, trying not to think about sad things, thanking life for the opportunity it had given her. When she woke up, she noticed that the cygnet had also woken up. Instinctively, he sought her warmth, so she decided that he was not afraid of her and also wanted to be near her. However, he didn't see her transform, so she told him not to be afraid. She just changed unexpectedly. The baby called her mom after hearing some familiar word, which at first made her delighted. He asked her if this was his mother, whom he had lost so long ago. However, it then dawned on Catherine that this was a transformed human, although she did not think that this was the work of her daughter. At the same time, all the princes were gathered in the imperial palace of the Rohan Empire. One of the princes asked what was going on. He was so scared when he received the message. All the brothers gathered in the hall. The fourth was reporting to the second, whose name was Kirill. Everyone was wondering how they would explain everything to the emperor if he found out what had happened. However, it was not possible to hide anything. At that moment, the doors swung open. The head of the empire entered, who was famous for his harsh character and penchant for bloody murders. He appeared in full military uniform, with an iron helmet and protective armor. Taking off his hat, he announced that he had returned. Looking at the princes, he was surprised why they had gathered, but immediately said that she had heard an interesting story. His brothers greeted him hesitantly, but they knew it would not end well. In their heads, they had already begun to make plans on how they could justify themselves. Looking at them menacingly, he said that it looked like they had a lot of fun while he was gone. And then he demanded that they tell him everything in the smallest details, since he already knew that their little sister had disappeared. They began the story by saying that yesterday after dinner the princess was playing in her palace, then she disappeared along with Rome. Before this, she asked the maids to leave for a while. No one knows where they disappeared to. The emperor asked if he had appointed his brother to this post so that he would leave her unattended. However, he noted that Haniel was still so young and so afraid that she began to cry at the sight of armed knights. The emperor asked if this meant leaving the child without armed guards. At the same time, one of the brothers said that the pulse stone that was in Haniel's room did not react in any way. If something happened to her, this stone would turn black because it was made by their late mother, asking for help from a powerful magician. The prince did not understand why he was being asked to rely on some stone when it came to the life of his sister. He asked when Rome had left. This brother was always unpredictable, came back without warning and said he only wanted to see Haniel, and then disappeared without a trace. He was the fifth brother who inherited strong magical abilities from his mother's side and showed outstanding talent in magic since childhood. Eventually, under the pretext of studying, he renounced all his titles and disappeared for several years. Sometimes he appeared, but no one could have imagined that it could lead to such an incident. The emperor asked if they had contacted the magic tower and received an affirmative answer. Rome needed to be found immediately. Before his magical traces disappeared most likely, he had not yet managed to cross the border with the child. However, the emperor understood that no one in the empire had seen Haniel, so almost no one knew what she looked like. The head of the empire cried out again, reminding her that she was the only princess of their family and the entire Rhone Empire. It was a girl with platinum hair and red eyes, but the prince could not remember how old she was now. At this time, Catherine realized that the little swan was still a person. She couldn't believe that Rana had actually done this to her. How could she have encroached on a child? Although anything could be expected from her, she then decided to ask the little girl who turned her. She answered that she didn't know, and she spoke very indistinctly. Her speech had not yet fully formed. Then Catherine decided to ask where her parents were, but the little girl was completely upset and could not answer. But the Duchess was sure that the little girl could not be alone. Perhaps the family business had gone bankrupt, so the girl rebelled against her fate. She asked how old she was, but she only repeated the phrase after her, without answering the question. Catherine laid her head down and thought that nothing could be expected from such a small child. She couldn't understand what she had done in her past life, that she had gotten into such a strange situation. When she asked again where her mom and dad were, the Swan replied that her dad was in heaven. She enthusiastically began to tell that there are many stars in the sky, and there is also Madam Sun and Madam Moon. Catherine decided to ask where her mother was, to which she replied that her mother was here. She reached out to her, and she could not control herself and took her into her arms. After this, the little girl said that her brother said that Mom was in the land of lakes, and it turned out to be true. Catherine realized that she had heard this name somewhere before, but she couldn't remember it. She asked her who this brother was, and she, baby, answered that this was the fifth brother. Then she said with delight that her brother was cool, and Catherine again thought that she had heard this somewhere before. It seems she was the first to understand what kind of romance we were talking about, so she asked if the little girl had other brothers. She replied that she had a lot of brothers. Catherine had difficulty remembering the plot of this book. In that story, the main character got married 13 times and he killed 12 of his wives. At the same time, the main character was surrounded only by brothers, which means that it was this little girl who became the main character in this book. With hope, Catherine asked if she had at least one sister, to which she received a negative answer. After that, she decided to find out how many brothers she had. She began to count, listing them first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Then Catherine realized that she was not mistaken. The novel was definitely the right one. The main character had 7 brothers. The little girl enthusiastically replied that yes, Haniel had 7 brothers. So her name was revealed. Now it was clear who she should look for. However, this still did not lift the veil of secrecy, since it was unclear what she should do with this name. But just in case, she asked if Haniel's older brother was by any chance that famous tyrant. Throughout the kingdom, even on the lake, they heard that the head of the empire was distinguished by his tough character. He started many wars and he emerged victorious in all of them. Moreover, he participated in them independently, not disdaining to put on armor. And now Catherine remembered exactly what the book was called. It was Little Princess of the Cabin. The main character lost her parents and was raised by her older brothers, but no one was interested in their younger sister. She grew up as a mischievous child, neglected by everyone, and by someone's conspiracy, she escaped from the palace and moved to a neighboring country. In fact, Catherine was hoping it would be her younger sister, but things turned out differently. According to the plot, a little princess, who grew up strong despite difficulties, saved a prince from a neighboring country. As the love between them developed, they were noticed by her older brothers. In fact, the story was quite banal, but it was the reason why Catherine still remembered this book. Firstly, there were exactly 7 brothers, and all of them showed their disdain for the princess. Each of them was a terrible narcissist. The biggest problem was the eldest of them, if history is to be believed. He was a tyrant, a warlike and cold-blooded lord of darkness. He handled the ball better than his tongue, and with every step he took, someone's blood was spilled. Well, the ending of the book was terrible. After learning that the older brothers were neglecting the younger princess, the main character became angry and eventually found them, tore them apart, and the kingdom of Rohan was engulfed in the flames of war. Then the love that was between the princess and the main character came to an end. She became an empress, but was always under supervision. Even though it was revenge for her suffering, she remained unhappy as her family was destroyed. Catherine understood that the story was still far from developing, but now she needed to think about what to do next. She asked what happened to Haniel, why she ended up on this lake. She stubbornly called her mom, to which Catherine replied that she was not her mom at all. Although the baby's parents died, she still had a family that had rights to her. However, she answered her too harshly, which made the little girl completely upset. Catherine wanted to leave things as they were. If she liked calling her that, then she could allow it. However, there was a point here since Catherine herself was afraid of getting attached, and besides, she did not want to be a kidnapper. She asked why the baby thought she was her mother. She replied that they were absolutely similar, to which Catherine noted that even their feathers were different colors. Pointing to herself, she said that she is a black swan. While the baby is a white swan, they are different. However, she didn't care. She stubbornly insisted on her point. It was difficult to argue with such a small child. Being the mother of the main character wasn't so bad, but Catherine still tried to stand her ground. She showed the little girl the difference between them, but she simply did not perceive it. The little princess was simply happy that she finally had a mother, even if she had to go to the land of lakes to get it. Despite the lengthy arguments, Catherine understood that the baby would need to be fed. However, she didn't know what would be suitable for this. Usually swans ate fish. For such a little one, it was necessary to find something smaller so that she would not become completely exhausted. Catherine didn't think about it at all now. She was sincerely glad that she was no longer alone. They continued their conversation and, arguing among themselves, went to the lake. At the same time, Catherine noted that even when she is sad, this little girl is very similar to her. It would be great if she really was her daughter, but they have different plumage. Although she didn't hide in her heart that she would like it to be true. But she had to remember that she was related to the cruelest emperor in the universe, and Catherine herself was already cursed enough. At least now she could still live as a human, but in the future it is unknown how this could end. Arriving at the lake, Catherine decided that she needed to talk to Selena and asked the little girl to go for a walk. She immediately became upset. It was immediately obvious that everyone treated her with indifference, but now there were important questions. She asked the all-knowing Selena what she had heard about the emperor. Her guide in this world immediately cringed, shuddering even at the mention of him. She said that she had wanted to tell him the emperor's name earlier, but Catherine was not interested. Now that she knows it's her signet's older brother, the information has become relevant. It turned out that his name was Rashid Pernois III. Catherine had never heard of him before, asking if he was really that scary. Selena noted that since he ascended the throne, the empire's territory had doubled. However, he started so many wars which had never happened before, and yet when he was the crown prince, he stayed in the Winter Palace. It was quite close to the Duchess's castle, and in every part of the empire there were such places where royal persons stayed. Before her death, the late empress also came here, but they have not appeared for a long time. Catherine decided to clarify whether Celine knew anything about the emperor's younger sister, but she was not aware. She noted that Catherine should have known about this, but the imperial family lived too far away. There was harmony between the parents of the imperial family. They were even destined to leave this life together. The Duchess noted that something was still wrong here. Something didn't add up. Was there really so little information about the youngest princess? Celine was convinced that the emperor had no other wives or concubines, so all the children were of the same blood. She recalled that the princess was originally supposed to be officially proclaimed when she turned 2 years old, her name and title posted in temples throughout the empire. However, there were rumors that she was either sick or dead, so no one looked into the matter. It is still unknown whether she really existed, what she looked like, and how old she was. At the same time, the baby looked quite cute, even with webbed feet and wings. Catherine thought hard, to which Selena replied that the youngest princess would in any case remain the object of close attention from the royal court. Even though the emperor was busy with his warriors, he would hardly leave his only sister unattended. However, given that she had not yet been proclaimed as a princess, if someone had taken her in as a foster child, it would not have been considered kidnapping. Catherine wanted the child to stay with her so much that she was ready to resort to any tricks. However, it was important to remember that the punishment for this could be very severe, because when the youngest prince disappeared, his kidnappers were caught and burned at the stake for a week. They did this on purpose so that he would suffer for a long time. Selena also noted that she tried to find out about the baby on the lake, but no one had lost a signet. Catherine decided that she needed to find his guardian, at which time the younger brothers reported to the emperor. They said that Prince Rome put the maids into a trance. Everyone remembers how he came, but no one remembers what happened after. He noted that all the maids had very bad headaches, to which the emperor responded that they should cut them off. Since they can't remember, they don't need heads at all. They were supposed to look after the baby. The brothers were outraged and reminded him that the maids could do nothing about it. To this, the emperor replied that now there was no need to feel sorry for all those who were responsible and failed. He reminded her that at least someone had to take care of her. She was the only girl born in the palace surrounded by men. Small, fragile, like a porcelain doll. No one approached her. All the brothers pushed each other towards the baby, not wanting to mess with her. Only one brother, whom she trusted the most, was the only one who messed around with him without any hesitation. However, the emperor understood that he too did not take the initiative in raising the child. He still couldn't forget how their mother died because of her. Rashid still remembered being told that his mother had died after giving birth, and that his father was too old to cope with the grief, so they had to bury both of them. Then all the other brothers were afraid that the crown prince would simply kill the little girl who had killed their parents. He approached her to see if she was alive or not, and touched her with his finger. In response, a loud cry was heard, judging by which one could conclude that the child was quite healthy. The prince said that he had to go, leaving the care of the child to Kirill. Then he was reminded that the child needed a name. According to the law, the emperor of the Rohan dynasty had to name the child. He replied that it was too boring for him, but he understood that he could not abandon his duties. Then he turned around and said that they should call her Haniel, which seemed appropriate enough to him. It seemed like the boys weren't raising a child. They had absolutely no idea what to do with a little girl. Kirill turned to the emperor again, to which he asked with displeasure what he wanted from him. He recalled that Haniel was very shy, had difficulty adapting, and spoke more slowly than other children. He suggested changing the maids, as they were not coping with their tasks. Then the emperor asked when children generally start to speak properly. Before that, there were only boys. They didn't know what to do with a girl. Twins were generally thrown into the air so that they would start screaming, believing that their speech would improve from this. However, the emperor forbade such things with the girl in the courtyard, but he also did not know the solution. The fourth prince raised children, but his way of thinking was very different from the others. Then it was decided that it would be better to wait until the child started talking on his own, because he couldn't suffer and cry all the time. Then the leader of the Paladins and Duke of the South, Peyton, entered the hall, bringing news of the possible whereabouts of their little sister. He reported that Fivan and Veronin had found traces of Rome. He had crossed the central region a week ago. The emperor thought, then this meant that he went north. Peyton said that he had sent magicians there, intending to join them soon, but the emperor stopped him. He said that he would deal with Rome himself, since it was a family matter. The gaze of all the men darkened. The last time the emperor smiled like that, an entire kingdom disappeared. At the lake, Catherine called out to her baby. Without her, she hid in the bushes all the time and did not come out, but her mother ran out to her with a loud scream. Catherine thought that it was too late to fix anything now. Apparently, she would continue to call her that. She invited her to sit down next to her, to which she happily agreed. She landed a little awkwardly, and Catherine thought that Haniel was making her heart beat faster. However, she still decided to say that she was not her mother and that she needed to be called something else. When asked where her mother was then, Catherine replied that she must be in heaven. However, she shouldn't be called that, so the little girl asked how to address her. After some thought, Catherine decided that Miss Black Swan would be quite suitable. Calling her by her name was also not allowed, so this was the ideal option. She asked Haniel to tell her how she got there, because she couldn't have come there herself. Someone had to bring her anyway. The Duchess also wanted to know where she had lived before and what had happened to her. In order to get the child to talk, she brought with her a small fish, which the swan really liked. In her past life, she was a zookeeper, so she knew how to cook treats for the animals. After this, the little girl replied that she used to live in a palace. When asked how she got out of there, she replied that her brother Rome carried her out in his arms. This brother was her favorite. Flowers and sparks appeared from his hands, and when he hugged her, she grew wings. It became clear that the baby has a brother who is a magician, and how she turned into a swan. After that, Haniel said that when Brother Rome comes, she is very happy, he plays with her and talks. Catherine decided to clarify what kind of relationship she had with her other brothers. Then something unexpected happened. The little girl simply burst into tears, so the Duchess decided to change the subject. However, she could not understand what they could do if the child began to cry just at the mere mention of them. Then she asked where Rome had gone. and why she was alone on the lake. The little girl replied that he asked where she wanted to go. She replied that she wanted to see her mother. As a result, he brought her to the land of lakes. Catherine told her that she couldn't find her mother, but she would try to find her brother. The little girl replied that he had promised to bring her a cake, her favorite chocolate one, but he did not come, and she became scared, so she followed the birds until she found herself in the land of lakes. Catherine was outraged by such irresponsibility, how one could leave a child alone. The baby started crying again, after which the Duchess said that if she continued like this, she would not get any more treats. After that, she regretted her harshness and asked for forgiveness, but she really didn't have time to calm her down. She decided to go and look for her brother on her own. At the same time, Selena suggested waiting here, but Catherine was sure that he would definitely not come. Waiting never changed anything. He needed to start looking now before it was too late. Or the brother went to get a cake and their paths diverged. Perhaps you can find out what happened in the pastry shop. Selena brought her a map so she could find the place she needed. For this, she risked her life as she snuck into the kitchen through the back door, but for a tasty treat from Catherine, she was ready to do anything. She didn't like fish before, but this dried one had a completely different taste than fresh. Catherine thought to herself that of course he was different. After all, she had spent 10 whole years developing feed. The experience of being a zookeeper is not something that can be lost over time, but she would prefer to have a richer and more useful one. Looking at the map, she realized that the city was much larger than she thought. They were located near the kingdom of Levante, and the heir to the throne of this kingdom was the main character of that book. So everything is going according to the plot. Haniel reached the place where she should have been according to the previous scenario. If she were 16 years old, Catherine would already be thinking about how to marry her off profitably. However, she did not want to risk her life while her tyrant emperor brother was nearby, so she asked where the pastry shops were in the city. Selena replied that there were only 3 of them, and the journey would take her more than an hour, so she needed to choose the closest one. The duck told her where it was, but the Duchess chose the farthest one. She remembered Haniel saying that she followed the black birds. There weren't many types of migratory birds at this time of year. They needed a swamp to hide in. This place was the best. Having received praise from the duck, Catherine immediately got ready to leave before sunset. She tried to dress as inconspicuously as possible, as she did not want to be recognized. As she left, she asked Selena to take care of the baby while she was gone. The wise duck was surprised, as she thought that she would take on the child's upbringing herself, but Catherine noted that she had a family. You can't take their child away from them, and she tried to prove that she didn't have any feelings for him. At this time, the emperor and his companions set off along the trail that had been indicated to him. He had been here just 3 years ago, but everything had changed so much. His whole life had become different. Even when their mother was pregnant with Haniel, she stayed in this palace. When someone called him over, addressing him by his title, he snapped and said, "Does he really want to give him away?" His brother asked if he would like to meet Lady Rana, who ruled this side of the kingdom. They were at war during the late Duke's funeral and were unable to attend, so perhaps it would be worthwhile to convey their condolences to the lady. This was all the more important, since she could become the ruler of the north and the successor to the Duke of Evendale. They knew that the Duke had no son, but he had a widow, and the prince asked when she would like to marry again. One of the brothers asked who would want to marry an old, sick woman. And it was unclear why the lady was running the country herself, what the Duchess was doing at all. Some of them heard that she had a bad reputation. They said that she was a witch. The brothers had doubts since there were very few such people left. All this time they turned a blind eye to Rome's actions, because their mother said that since there were so many children in the family, one of them could afford to live as he wanted. At the same time, the prince reminded that the disappearance of their sister could lead to her becoming a hostage of another country. And this means that they become vulnerable. At this moment, the emperor was called out and informed that the magical trail stopped right there. Nobody knew where to go since Brother Rome was no longer to be found. They all entered the city gates together, where Catherine was also heading at that time. It was a wonderful place with beautiful nature. At this time, Catherine was walking along the map, admiring the local flora, considering it quite romantic. If it weren't for the stray dogs that showed her the way, she might not have made it today. At this time, she thought that maybe it was worth returning to the life of a black swan. She would not have to be so nervous and look back. However, at this time she approached the pastry shop and decided to take her words back. After all, no matter how much she loves her life, such desserts can only be tasted in a human body. So she thanked the human world, determined to find out what happened to her missing brother. To do this, she needed to get inside to talk to the manager. She headed there but was immediately called out to, which forced her to stop. A woman standing in line said that you can't just go into a pastry shop. She pointed out to Catherine the huge line of people standing waiting. Everyone looked at her with displeasure as she had broken their rules, which she simply did not know about. Catherine tried to say that she just needed to ask, to which she received a lot of criticism that women were getting up at dawn and queuing for this place. It was a pastry shop that won the grand prize at the Rohan Empire's dessert competition. Catherine apologized, to which she received the answer that she was pretending and that she had to get in line the evening before. If she thought that at night she turns into a black swan, she would have been caught and eaten by now. However, she did not say anything, although she had the thought of answering that she was a duchess. But then she remembered that in these parts, her reputation had long since collapsed. Rebecca spreads rumors that she is a witch, a greedy woman who pestered and married a dying duke. So no one would sympathize with her. At this time, the brothers approached the final point. Looking at it, they thought it looked like a nice restaurant. Many visitors told them about him, but they wanted to look around first. At that moment, Catherine called out to them. They turned around and asked if she was theirs, and if so, for what reason. Wanting to help them, Catherine said that there was a line, and they would have to wait in it like everyone else. She was surprised why they were so upset, because she just wanted to help so that they wouldn't end up in the same situation as her. The Duchess asked them if they were really looking for the bakery that had won the grand prize at a dessert competition, to which they received a vague answer. In any case, they had to stand in line like the others, which she did not fail to inform them about. But she didn't understand that she was talking to princes. She pointed to the children standing in line in front of her, pointing out how well-behaved they were. They heard such a flattering opinion from her, and they were very pleased. She thought about those 3 men. They looked like they had been looking for this restaurant for more than a day. Then she looked ahead and wondered if the line was getting shorter or if it was only growing. The emperor was about to decide the issue with the sword, but his companion stopped him. At this time, the children were talking among themselves. It was very cold, and they no longer hoped that they would be able to buy a chocolate cake today. At the same time, the younger brother noted that he was quite scared. He was frightened by these men in black cloaks. Catherine decided to calm them down by saying that these uncles were not bad, and she did it quite firmly. When asked how she knew this, she replied that bad people don't like cakes. Then she saw that the line had shortened and these kids were supposed to go in next. However, the owner of the pastry shop came out and said that everything was sold out for today. Catherine was indignant because there were still plenty of desserts on display, to which the owner replied that they had all already been ordered. She replied that it was impossible to order desserts here. Who could do that? He replied that it was a special order for Lady Rebecca for an afternoon snack. Then he became indignant and asked if they really wanted to steal desserts intended for such an important person. Then he turned around and was about to leave, at which point the emperor again barely managed to restrain himself from starting a fight. However, it was Catherine who decided to start the fight and did not let him close the door because she needed answers. She said his mannerisms suggested he was more of a street vendor than a gourmet dessert shop owner. However, he repeated that all the remaining desserts were intended exclusively for Lady Rebecca. Then Catherine decided to take extreme measures and introduce herself. She took off her hood and said she was the Duchess, Rebecca's mother, after which she asked if he was ready to answer her in the same way after he found out who she was. At that moment, everyone listened to her in amazement and could not believe their eyes, since almost no one had seen her face before. She heard whispering behind her, and the 3 men behind her also became wary. The sweaty pastry chef asked if she really was the Duke of Evendale's wife, and then asked her for proof. The Duchess was outraged and asked what they were for. She knew there were rumors about her, but the owner of the pastry shop must have known how much power she had. After that, she asked if she really looked like she only cared about personal gain, and she said that if he really needed to check her, she could call someone from home. But as soon as everything was confirmed, his pastry shop would be over. She didn't expect such agility from this man, but he immediately rushed inside. He got out all sorts of cakes to avoid the Duchess's wrath. He personally packed and decorated everything, after which he handed them to her with a low bow. He did not fail to say that she had an excellent choice because she had ordered the best sweets. At this time, the boy standing in front of her told his sister that she really was a witch. Catherine decided to treat the children, because these were exactly the chocolate cakes they wanted. The girl asked for forgiveness for her brother calling her a witch, but her brother laughed and asked her to stand up. After this, she took off her cloak, offering it to the children so that they would not freeze on the way home. At parting, she said many pleasant words, wishing to return before dark, to which the children responded with gratitude. After this, she turned to the gentleman who stood behind her. Since they still hadn't left, she decided to please them. Catherine handed them a box of sweets so that they wouldn't leave empty-handed. She offered them a treat, since she also had her own principles. The emperor immediately snatched the box from her hands. She didn't even have time to come to her senses, but he was so fast. In any case, the pastry shop was now free, and she could finally calmly talk to the owner about Rome's whereabouts. However, the men, apparently, were not going to leave, waiting for her. Catherine didn't believe it. The sun was setting too quickly. Soon she would turn into a black swan. She had already felt the signal that informed her of the transformation, not understanding what she would need to do now. The worst thing was that she didn't have time to ask about Rome. She urgently needed to get inside. At this moment, the emperor tried to hold her back, but she tried to break free with all her might. Then another brother rushed to his aid. They needed to talk to the Duchess. They asked her if she was really Evendale's widow, but she apologized and said she was in a hurry. Despite the fact that she had turned around, the emperor tried to take another step. Then she simply pushed him away, saying that she was absolutely not joking. He was taken aback, not expecting such a reaction, after which Catherine simply turned around and ran away. Finally, she told them to eat something sweet and make their faces softer. The men were still standing in shock, as they did not expect such a reaction from the Duchess. However, they still had some sweets, which the emperor's brothers had high hopes for. At this moment, His Majesty did something unexpected, but characteristic of his character. He simply crushed the entire box, depriving them of their well-deserved dinner. His brothers saw that he was boiling over, but he still managed to restrain himself several times, so it could have happened much earlier. He stated that as an emperor, he was not going to worry about the family affairs of outsiders, but he needed to know if it was true that there were witches living in his country. After this, he ordered the immediate preparation of the Winter Palace. Meanwhile, Catherine finally reached the lake. Selina was very worried and expressed her concerns. Catherine had just started to tell how everything went, but then she asked where the baby was and why she was here alone. The duck replied that she could only watch, since the baby had hidden in the bushes and had never come out. Only her fluffy bottom was sticking out from the reeds. She was completely despondent, but hearing her mother's voice, she immediately perked up. The princess happily threw herself into his arms. Her daughter was indeed too shy. Selina said she looked for her everywhere. She didn't even eat. She also said that she had asked Lady Mello for a favor, to which Catherine had responded rather rudely. She asked how she could allow herself to entrust the child to a stranger, especially Lady Malone. She was now a goose, but previously she served as an etiquette teacher in the palace. Having a rather difficult character, she dared to tell Rana to maintain her dignity as a princess. In some ways, she was actually good. She was currently teaching etiquette to the people exiled to the lake. However, she advised starving Haniel until she asked for food, which enraged Catherine. Then Selina decided to change the subject and asked what they had managed to find out in the pastry shop, but she had no useful news. She remembered pushing the man away and felt a chill run down her spine. After which she decided that their beauty could not allow them to stop strangers. At the same time, Catherine noted that from touching this man's chest, she felt that he was definitely an unusual person. She still didn't understand why they wanted to stop her. Maybe it was because of her kindness. At that moment, two figures appeared in the forest. Catherine told Selina to hide the child. She was afraid that she would not be able to do it alone. Then the Duchess replied that she could turn to Lady Mello. Both daughters arrived so late at this time, it did not bode well. They put a rope around Catherine's neck, forcing her to go with them. She struggled as best she could, but she understood that there was no escape. Rebecca also started yelling at her, saying that she had become too bold and demanded answers from her. Catherine thought she was incredibly stupid, because even if she spoke in the form of a swan, no one would understand her. So she tried to attack her, thinking that even if she died, she would tear off her wrists as a last resort. It is unknown how this argument would have ended if the older sister had not intervened. She reminded the younger one that she must always maintain the dignity of a princess, no matter the situation. Thus, Lady Mellow's instructions did have an effect on her character, and the lessons were not in vain. She asked what kind of dialogue could be built with animals that cannot speak. At that moment, something happened. Catherine felt changes in her body. After a bright flash, she saw her daughters, who said that she was taking on a human form. She didn't understand what was happening, but she understood what they were saying. Looking at her hands, which had just been wings, she realized that she had become human again. However, sitting on the floor she did not understand because it was still night. Rana just chuckled and asked what was so difficult about turning night into day when you were able to turn a person into an animal. She had a special thing that collects sunlight and can be used at night. It was ideal for the north, where the days were shorter, but Rana said that was beyond Catherine's wildest dreams. In any case, this time it worked, which was only to the Duchess's advantage. However, Rebecca did not calm down. She kept trying to provoke her sister to anger, declaring that this woman went out into the city alone. She stated that she wanted to definitely disgrace them, or even worse, run away. She also noted that this woman dares to claim that she is their mother. Rana turned to Catherine and asked her to clarify this point. Catherine said they call her mommy all the time, but who would have thought that they would come in the middle of the night and put a noose around their own mother's neck? They asked her why she went to the pastry shop, to which she asked them why a 20-year-old girl would go there. After all, this is a stupid question. She wanted desserts, to which Rana replied that she spends most of her time as a swan. Why does she need sweets? Catherine said Rana could try eating raw fish all the time herself. Rebecca still persisted, saying that these words could not be trusted. She suggested that they bring her sweets to her swamp. Then Rana suddenly declared that she could go out. She said that she had nothing to fear, since Catherine was only half human. When she realized that the hunters could kill her, she would crawl back. Then the Duchess asked what the problem was. It turns out the problem is that she was pretending to be kind, and rumors will start circulating about it. At the same time, Rana stated that she envies her only because she is the successor of the North. Otherwise, she is completely useless, and Rana will kill her as soon as she decides to do so. However, Catherine said that she was not interested in power, so there was no point in talking about it. Rana laughed and said that this matter could only go to her. Rebecca was struck by the change in her sister's face. The older sister said that she was going to live happily ever after, as her beloved stepmother had told her, but that in no way meant that she would not kill her. Catherine decided to remind her that a lawyer from the Northern District Court would be coming to see her next week. Rana confirmed these words and said that as long as the Duchess was alive, so that he could be sure there would be no strange things. No one will know anything about their precious mother, because the wounds may not always be visible. Catherine realized that this was not an empty threat, but Rana only laughed. She grabbed her by the throat and then told Rebecca to bring all the snacks from the kitchen that she wanted to feed to her beloved stepmother as punishment. Rebecca decided to ask again, after which she received a threat that she would feed her too if she did not hurry. As a result, the younger sister took off, knowing that it was bad to joke around with the older one. However, when she went into the kitchen, she saw many ducks that attacked her. She began to kick them away. Catherine tried to intercede, but she was not in a better position either. Rana immediately switched gears and said that if she did that even once more, she would be in trouble. Then Rebecca called out to Rana, who snapped at her but still paid attention. She pointed forward with her finger, where a bright glow could be seen. Rana approached her, after which her gaze changed dramatically. After that, she declared that Catherine was very lucky and let her go. However, when she approached the door, she saw something so unexpected that she completely forgot about her stepmother. Her gaze froze. She couldn't believe that it had finally happened. Catherine noticed how much this evil woman had changed. She now looked completely different. Lying on the floor, she knew that this meant a lot to her, but she didn't know why. Raising herself a little, she saw that the light had come on in the Winter Palace. After that, she decided that she was really lucky, since this had never happened in her memory. The Winter Palace was previously used by the emperor and his family, but they have not visited it recently. At this time, the servants apologized for not being able to prepare him properly, as they did not know about the prince's arrival. They were asked not to fuss, as the emperor was here for the first time since his coronation. Then the butler said that he would immediately order the bedroom and study to be tidied up. The emperor asked if everyone knew about his arrival, to which the butler replied that as soon as all 3 torches were lit, the entire north was engulfed in excitement. In addition, they immediately received an invitation from the Duchess of Evendale, the owner of the northern regions. The emperor noticed that the invitation had the duke's coat of arms on it, which completely matched his own, while Catherine was treating Selina's wounds. She scolded her for risking her life to save her. However, the stubborn duck said that if it weren't for her, something bad could have happened to her. Walking in the garden, Catherine decided that now it was no longer necessary to look for Rome, but simply to hand Haniel over to her brother. However, the question was whether he would believe that the little Swan was his sister. She thought she could say that she had seen with her own eyes how his younger brother had bewitched the girl. Thinking that she would just return the child and be done with it, Catherine became very sad. At that moment they arrived at Lady Mello, who was now holding the little princess. The evil caterpillar, as Catherine believed her to be, greeted her mistress. She said that she had not expected to see her here, although she had long wanted to meet her. The Duchess replied that she would have come earlier, but she saw no need. After that, she asked how the baby behaved, to which she received both pleasant and unpleasant answers. Lady Mello said that she seemed to be of noble birth and from an aristocratic family. However, she does not behave properly according to etiquette she needs to learn. The first part of the phrase touched Catherine. She already felt that she was becoming attached to the child. However, Lady Mello noted that such a child needed systematic training to make a true lady out of her. After which, she reported that she even invited a new teacher for the students to add some polish. Catherine thought that she must have found some trusting migratory bird, but once she decided on something, there was no stopping her. After this, Catherine decided to ask the question that had been tormenting her since she saw Rania's face during their last meeting. Lady Mello said that she might not be able to help her, but she was still able to satisfy Catherine's curiosity. At the same time, in order to appease the old goose, she noted that thanks to her she had learned a lot. Lady Mello reminded that even in the body of an animal, certain principles must be observed. After all, if you fall into despair because of the curse and think only about food every day, then you can actually become a bird. After which, the teacher invited her to meet the children, although she immediately scolded them for not keeping their heads down when a person approached. Catherine thought again that this was a heartless old woman. Even if she was pierced, not a drop of blood would flow. However, Selina calmed her down and said that little ones need to be taught to protect themselves in the wild. At the same time, Lady Mello was always very strict, but she was fair. Catherine still couldn't calm down, because she understood that her little girl was not alone, but she needed to know what kind of person her older brother was. Selina noted that it would be better to take care of her on her own. There would of course be many difficulties, but it would be safer. The Duchess replied that it was not that she was bothering her, but that she was simply afraid of becoming attached to her and spending the rest of her life in melancholy. Catherine said it was just a temporary act of kindness for her, but for the baby it would be more. She will be waiting for the meeting all the time and thinking what to do for this. You can't do this to a child. She herself used to do exactly the same thing when she was a little girl. Selina couldn't understand this because she always had a family. If Catherine takes care of her, it will only complicate things. Both of them turned their attention back to what the children were doing in class. They were preening their feathers, but Haniel was not focused. Catherine's maternal instinct kicked in, and she told Selina that it was just a child. She is not like them. In the future, she will have many people around her who will teach her everything and take care of her. Even if her brother is a heartless tyrant, he will still help his blood relative. At this time, her daughters asked the expert how the emperor's visits to the Winter Palace usually proceeded. Typically, the highest-ranking nobles in the region will host a welcoming banquet. However, Catherine was not allowed to leave the house. Selina was categorically against it. On the other hand, Rana didn't ask her permission when she cursed her. At this time, the castle was undergoing vigorous preparations to welcome the emperor. Rania chased the maids, demanding that they steal chandeliers with diamonds so blinding that their eyes would be blinded. A visitor came to her and asked whom she wanted to blind like that. It was Ronan, the mage who made Selena turn into a duck. Rania got furious and said that she didn't allow him to show up without her permission. He replied that he only wanted to help her because one cannot use magic recklessly. Moreover, he was surprised why the emperor accepted her invitation to the welcoming banquet. After all, according to tradition, the lords of the north arranged it, but it was a matter of etiquette. In fact, the eternally busy emperor did not attend any events at all. In addition, the magician expressed his doubts as to why the emperor appeared only accompanied by princes, without knights and guards. Rania became furious and demanded that Ronan not dare to talk about him in such a tone. The magician asked her for forgiveness, noting that he had similar fates with her, and he was just trying to help. He also reminded that, according to custom, the Duchess should personally greet His Majesty. Rania said that this would only bring shame on them, since a common girl could not represent the ducal family. To which Ronan noted that His Majesty could ask about this himself, since tradition required it. The Duke's eldest daughter was convinced that he would not bother with such trifles, because he only thought about wars and the empire. To which the magician objected that perhaps other princes thought differently. Rania replied that she would simply say that the Duchess was ill and in bed. At this time, 2 snails outside the window were eavesdropping on this conversation in order to later report it to the Duchess. Looking out the window, the Duke's eldest daughter noted that someone locked in the land of lakes could not know how the world worked. The snails conveyed everything, after which Max asked why the Duke's daughters treated her like that. Catherine was grateful to them for the story, as she needed to know the details. One of them said that she used to be a knight, then she became a duck, and now she is a snail. To Rania, they were just the bottom of the food chain, but to Catherine, they were listening devices. Selena turned to her and said that Haniel had again not made friends with anyone and was hiding from everyone. Catherine reassured her, saying that she didn't need to adapt to this place. After which she announced that it was time for her to get ready for the ball, which she would definitely attend. The evidence decided to warn her that Lady Rania had blocked the path to the ducal palace with thorny bushes. Then Catherine asked the beaver to come here, since she needed to get there anyway. Finally, the evening came. The whole palace was decorated and awaiting the arrival of the guests. Rania stood in a beautiful dress and greeted Count and Countess Colonel. They said they were thrilled to see the palace doors open. Rania noted that she could not receive guests when His Majesty and her father were fighting for the empire on the battlefield. Everyone around was surprised how one could be so smart and beautiful at the same time, and also the most desirable bride in the north. Everyone tried to introduce her to their sons, hoping that she would become their daughter-in-law. As a plus, they pointed out that they were close to His Majesty. At the same time, the women praised their sons as best they could. However, Rania was much more tempted than them. She took the palms of these matrons in her hands, expressing to them the most sincere congratulations, after which she declared that someday their sons would find the best bride. Discouraged women walked away from her in droves, but she was not hurt or interested in this in any way. She had her own plan, which she was not ready to tell anyone. Soon the news of His Majesty's arrival was announced, and Rania's eyes lit up again. The emperor did not look very welcoming when he entered the hall. Rania immediately came out to greet him, introducing herself and wanting to please him. However, he asked her to stand up, without trying very hard to be tactful and polite. Rania reminded him that 3 years had passed since her first invitation and asked if he remembered her. He didn't understand. Then Rania said that 3 years ago the Empress came here. He noted that he had caused her a lot of trouble since she had arranged a reception in his honor. She assured that it was a great honor for her that the son of the empire had visited the north. The emperor replied that there were rumors that balls had not been held in this area before. The Duke's daughter noted that she was following etiquette, as they could not have fun while they were fighting. However, the prince immediately pointed out to her that she had broken some immutable rule, which left her in a stupor. The emperor reminded that according to etiquette he should be greeted by the Duchess, and this meant that the widow of the Duke of Evendale had to appear before him. After that, his face changed and he asked where she was now. When Rania asked again in confusion, he asked rather rudely if she had any hearing problems. She was confused and immediately noted that everything was fine with her, but she did not have time to come up with and tell the necessary lie. She thought to herself that the emperor didn't remember her at all, but he knew this woman from somewhere. She asked why such a noble man would look for her mother. When asked if she considered her mother ignoble, she replied that she was simply unwell and hardly left the house. She said that after the Duke's death she stopped eating and drinking and since then has not appeared in public. These answers shocked the emperor and the princes a little, but Rana did not calm down. She noted that this woman was crazy and was not capable of receiving the emperor with due respect. She herself thought that by this time they should have already started the first dance. Other nobles immediately stood up for the Duke's eldest daughter, declaring that everything was just as she had said. However, the emperor abruptly interrupted them and said that he had not given them the floor to speak. He asked if they were ready to answer for their words, or if Lady Rana would take this responsibility, since he had only recently seen the Duchess in the city alive and well. She was completely confused since she was not ready for such responsibility. She replied that she simply did not want to burden her sick mother, but then she heard footsteps. After which Catherine stated that if she had known that they would be so worried about her, she would have come earlier. Having put down on the floor the basket which she carried with her, she appeared in her most beautiful widow's attire. Rana immediately asked why she had come since she was not feeling well at all. Catherine replied that she had come to reassure everyone who was so worried about her. She thought to herself that it wouldn't hurt for her eldest daughter to have a simpler face. It seemed that she was about to bite her to death, but nothing could be changed. Rana tried to get out of the situation and said that she shouldn't have gotten out of bed, to which Catherine replied that she didn't want to leave such a heavy burden on her daughter. The eldest daughter still tried to wriggle out of it, but Catherine was no less caustic, after which she stated that she was ready to take on her responsibilities so that her daughter would not overwork herself so much. She had no choice but to temporarily give up her position, otherwise it would begin to look indecent. However, other nobles had come to her aid earlier, defending her, saying that her daughter was simply caring. But the Duchess was prepared for this and noted that others should not worry about her. She said that since they were so worried, they could come at any time and she would be ready to welcome them. Rania's face looked like she wanted to skin her alive right now. However, at this moment, the Duchess introduced herself to the Emperor, saying that she was the widow of the Duke of Evendale and was ready to greet him. Her heart was filled with awe and trembling, but it seemed to her that she had heard this voice somewhere before. He looked like the main villain, too sharp look and manners. However, he looked at her so intently that she was confused and did not know what to do next. In his rude manner, the Emperor asked if she had anything she wanted to tell him. Catherine felt pressure from just one look, to which the Emperor asked if they had seen each other before. The Duchess replied that she could not meet His Majesty, after which she giggled nervously and felt uncomfortable. She was thinking to herself how she could start a conversation with him about Haniel. It was impossible to talk at this moment. There were too many people around, and besides they were all staring. The Emperor could not resist asking why no one was having fun instead of looking at them. One of the princes said that His Majesty should start the dance first. Life had not prepared him for this. The Emperor replied that everyone should spend their time as usual, dance, wave swords, he didn't care. After which he turned his back on the guests, which further confirmed what a tyrant he was. Catherine noted that this was most likely why his younger brother ran away when he ascended the throne. Here Rana entered the game again and said that the room was a bit stuffy, after which she suggested that the Emperor step out for a while, away from prying eyes. She also said that as the eldest daughter in the family, she was ready to accompany him. The Emperor replied that, according to the law, her stepmother was considered the head of the family. Rania's fists nearly burst as she tried to respond politely to this remark. After this, she stated that mother needed to receive guests and she could not leave. However, Catherine had her own trump card that she planned to use. However, Rania still tried, offering rides on thoroughbred horses. She also said that her mother did not know the surrounding area well enough. Going for broke, Catherine said she was willing to offer a trip to Lake Perium. Rania turned around abruptly, which could have had a negative impact on her reputation, but she did not believe that she would dare. Catherine continued that it was on this lake that toucans, alcana swans, chandelier-sized turtles, and the legendary lynx with 7-colored plumage were introduced. Moreover, she was ready to accompany him as an important guest. Rania almost exploded at this proposal, and Catherine thought that besides all these animals, there was also his little sister. The emperor said that this was a good proposal. He remembered that the late empress also liked this lake. He came so close and looked at her that Catherine was simply at a loss. After that, he extended his hand towards her face, which made her blood run cold. She looked down, unprepared for what happened next. Fear gripped her heart. She saw that he was beautiful, but she did not understand her reaction. Not seeing what was happening, she opened her eyes only at the sound of his voice. He had a splinter in his hand, which he held after taking it from the Duchess's dress. Looking at her, he said that apparently the representative of the North really has something to show. At that moment, Catherine was amazed. She simply did not remember when she could have picked up this chip, although when the beavers were gnawing the bushes, anything could have happened. However, she decided to continue her line and said that His Majesty would like this nature. He replied that he would definitely accept her invitation and express his opinion. Rana reached out, trying to grab her stepmother when they were alone. She couldn't understand how Catherine could even dare to talk about that place, and she replied that her daughter had trampled all over her dress. After this, she demanded that he change his tone, but her adopted daughter did not calm down. She said that she should know who he was, after which she said that this would not end well. Afterwards, she said that no one would believe about the curse, and no one would come to her aid anyway, like last time. Furthermore, the Duchess had no evidence of the curse, to which she replied that she could demonstrate it. After all, judging by Rania's words, she was just a beggar who killed her husband. Doesn't she understand that now the opinion has completely changed? Besides, Catherine had nothing left to lose, so she could take extreme measures. Rana said that her death would not change anything, to which she objected. After all, at the very least, the Duke's eldest daughter will not be destined to become empress. There, she turned around and turned pale in the face, because she did not think that this fool would be able to guess her intentions. In fact, she was initially given everything, money, power, and fame, so she seemed to be postponing the engagement. However, everything was decided in one moment, when Catherine saw her gaze the previous time. She realized that she wanted something more than just marrying an ordinary man. So Catherine decided to talk to Lady Malo to find out why the emperor had not yet married. It turned out that the state mourning for the former emperor and his wife had not yet ended. All this must last for 3 years, but he must also find a woman he wants to marry. After these words, Rana grabbed her, demanding that she answer for her words. However, the Duchess said that if she were to expose her as a witch, the Duke's daughter herself would be tainted. Moreover, the daughter of a witch who suddenly dies will not be able to become empress. She will not be worthy of this honor. However, Catherine still calmed her down and said that she was not interested in Rania's life. But it wouldn't hurt for her to take classes for future brides. As Catherine left the room, she thought she should tone it down. But she understood that she was not ready to endure this forever. She needed to take care of herself. All she needed to be happy was to get Haniel back, and that would be the end of it. It seemed like it was time to say goodbye, but she wasn't ready for it. Selena was waiting for her. She was worried that something bad would happen to her. Haniel, who had been lying in the basket all this time, did not say a word. This worried Catherine, but she had to leave the baby with the ducks so she could take the cameraman for a walk. This sweet creature slept peacefully. It was very hard for Catherine to part with her. However, she did not know that she could be being watched at this time. She carefully tied a bow around the neck of her princess, whom she already loved madly. She was so cute that it was impossible not to get attached, and besides, she was very sensitive. Catherine asked her for forgiveness and said that she had no choice but to call this tyrant here. And it didn't matter that Haniel would only call her mom for such a short time. Just being with her for a little while was very important, and Catherine knew she would never forget it. At that moment, the baby stuck out her tongue, which seemed even more touching than before. To her question, the little girl answered that the teacher does this every time someone is in pain. In this way, she helped ease the pain of her adopted mother, which almost brought tears to her eyes. Her eyes widened. She knew she was guilty, but she had to do what she decided to do. At this time, Haniel asked if her mother was in pain. She replied that everything was fine, that she would not abandon her and would take care of her and would not repeat her mistakes again. Well, after which she said that she was not ready to break up with her, but she needed to do it, no matter what. Even if she couldn't raise her to be a beautiful princess, she would become the most beautiful swan in the world, Catherine promised her. At this time, the emperor, together with other princes, watched them from behind the bushes. They said it was better not to come closer, and it was definitely not normal. One of the princes noted that most likely the Duchess and this Swan have their own history. However, the emperor did not understand what it could consist of, but everyone was surprised by his behavior. He replied that they could not simply let the Duchess go, but he should not come closer at such a moment. The emperor decided that it was better to leave them alone now. The moment was too touching. His brothers were amazed. They had never seen such a reaction from the stern ruler. He replied that he would call Lady Rana, since it was a family matter and they would deal with it. At least they were sure that she had something to tell. And at that moment, Catherine had already turned into a swan. She brought the baby in a basket, saying that she had been waiting for the emperor all the time, but he did not come. Thus, it was not possible to return the baby to his relatives. Then Selina decided that if she had a mother, she needed a nanny, so why not become one? Catherine fully supported this decision and said that they needed to have a serious talk. She had not previously revealed why their baby girl was so elegant. She tried to keep it a secret that she was a princess. However, now the situation has changed. She told Selina that she does not have the authority to raise her. The emperor is this baby's brother, so she needs to be returned. Selina was in shock and cried out that something had to be done. However, she alarmed the other ducks, causing them to come running to her aid. However, she didn't want to know this information. She asked how Catherine had managed to find out that the little girl who had fallen on their heads was the princess of the empire. Then Catherine told her everything, because she needed help in this situation. Selina reminded that she initially decided that she would return her, so why did she change her mind? Catherine replied that when she met her older brother, she decided not to give him custody. Despite Selina's strong objections, Catherine managed to bribe her. She said that within a month she would bring her 20 carps, but she did not listen. Then she offered her 10 more to help her. The duck couldn't resist, so Catherine called Haniel and said she had found her a nanny. At this time, a conversation took place in the emperor's negotiating room. He wanted to know how long Rana had been serving as Duke of the North. It turns out that this has been happening since the previous duke was wounded in battle. Then the emperor asked what her stepmother was doing. His assistant replied that she was not of noble birth, so she was forced into marriage. The prince noted that the presence of legitimacy should have inspired respect, after which he asked what else they said about her that could disgrace her. The servant replied that there were rumors that she was a hereditary witch and crazy. It was said that the previous duke died because of her. Then the emperor decided to clarify whether she had become insane after the death of the child, to which he received a negative answer. Although there were rumors that she went mad after the death of her child, it is known that the duke died immediately after the wedding. The servant noted that they most likely did not have time to get to know each other better. The emperor then asked why she had such a reputation. The servant replied that in fact there are many people in the north who do not even know about the existence of the Duchess. The emperor noted that the rumors nevertheless remained. It is the young Duchess Rana who can boast that her servants and nobles treat her with great respect. The emperor was furious, after which he asked who the master of this servant was. He replied that he was certainly his emperor. His master noted that thanks to his remembering, he had now avoided being executed by having his intestines ripped out, after which he simply kicked him out and invited the princes. He asked them how the Duchess became a witch and whether she was really hurting children, after which he noted that, judging by what he saw, she treats children well. Then maybe she's just a witch who doesn't harm other people. He said that he wanted to find out for himself, and for this purpose he sent one of the princes to deliver a letter to her. They reminded him that he needed to switch to searching for their little sister, to which the emperor replied that perhaps they were connected. In the north, as is well known, there are many armed aristocracy, but it was strange that there were practically none at the ball. So that means there aren't that many of them, so there's a chance the north isn't guarded enough. After this, he asked that the letter be delivered to the Duchess immediately. The princes noted that it might simply not arrive, since few people know about it. The emperor replied that perhaps a place in the deepest, most remote corner of the estate, accessible only by a secret path, might be needed. This is exactly what he needs to go through to ensure that the Duchess receives his message. He appointed one of the brothers in charge, who was obliged to deliver it personally into the hands of Lady Catherine. At this time, she was sitting with her baby, who called her mom. She asked why she was no longer a black swan, and Catherine replied that she could call her mom when they were alone. This caused discontent among Selena, who said that she lived one day at a time. After all, in reality, she can only rely on the nanny. The others are of no help to her in this case. But Catherine couldn't help herself and was glad that the little girl called her that. After that, she asked how she recognized her as a human, to which she received the answer that she had her mother's smell. The duck decided to find out what the Duchess was thinking next, whether she really planned to raise a child without any plan. Catherine noted that she had become not so much a nanny as a sister to this little girl. Afterwards, she said that she would send her to school since there were no other options. Selena then stated that she would walk her to and from school herself to make sure that no harm came to her. The little girl asked her mother where she was going and whether she was really returning her to her brother. She said she didn't want to leave, her brother was too scary. Catherine reassured her and said that until he found someone who could take care of her, she would be there. At the same time, she named the baby Haniel, and Selena reminded her that this should not be done. She suggested several names to choose from. She could be called a whitey, a biped, or a squeak. However, Catherine didn't like all these names. She wanted to call her something completely different and chose the name Rana. That was the second name she had in the book she was reading. She used it when she was in hiding and living a completely different life. At that moment, there was a knock on the window. The adults were very scared because no one knew where she was. Catherine didn't dare approach, but she saw a silhouette behind the glass. She asked who was there, not daring to open the door and let in the uninvited guest. However, there was nothing to be done. She immediately asked who she had the honor of seeing. The young man replied that he was the emperor's brother and was glad to see her, but he had no choice but to come in person. He noted that they did not expect the regular letter to arrive, so they had to go through a difficult journey. All this was done with the aim of placing in her hands a letter that needed to be answered immediately. After Catherine read it, the prince asked if he could tell the emperor that she would soon be visiting him. Having received an affirmative answer, he took his leave, but the Duchess still could not come to her senses. Selena called her gently, but she showed no signs of life yet, but soon understood the decision. She said they would have to completely change their plan as unexpected adjustments had been made. At this time, the emperor was talking to his confidant, who said that those who practice black magic are easy to detect. They have predominantly black hair due to the evil accumulated within them. They are emotionally unstable and have a dazzling appearance. One of the emperor's brothers said that the Duchess fits this description perfectly. The emperor cut him off abruptly and asked all this, to which his confidant replied that magicians could take over a person's consciousness in an instant, and it would be difficult to get out of this situation. The head of the empire thought about it, but he was not ready to retreat right now. He was informed that in any case, the one who uses magic will give himself away. At that moment, his brother returned and said that the Duchess looked confused, but was looking forward to meeting him. After that, he decided to clarify whether he was sure that everything was okay. What if she really was a witch? However, they couldn't blame it all on the mages, because there were probably a couple of suspicious individuals in the north, besides his brother and sister. They answered him that this was so, but in the north, 2 women stood out. One of them is an angel in the flesh, the second is pure evil, and the emperor knows who we are talking about. And then he asked his servants to follow Lady Rana, and the second one interests him much more. At this time, the Duchess approached the emperor's palace and thought that she had sinned too much to stay in such a place. She urged herself to calm down, but it was very difficult for her to do so. She understood that they didn't know anything yet. She just needed to do what was right, which meant protecting the baby. Upon entering, she bowed before the emperor, and he immediately asked her to raise her head. Looking into his eyes, she realized that they were definitely cold, but they seemed familiar to her. On the other hand, he was the older brother of her beloved daughter, and their look was very similar. She smiled involuntarily, to which the emperor asked what she found funny. She didn't have time to find an excuse. At that moment, the emperor said that perhaps she was hiding something interesting from him. She firmly replied that under no circumstances, that since the Duke had died, she had been dragging out a miserable existence and grieving for him every day. She noted that nothing interesting was happening in her life. She thought to herself that the most important event in her life was meeting Haniel. However, the emperor immediately interrupted her. She did not understand why he was angry. After which she said that it was probably time for her to go, since she wanted to help, but they clearly didn't want to listen to her. But the emperor started a different conversation, and he said that he saw her completely differently that day. Catherine turned pale and could not understand what day they were talking about. He answered, "Can't she remember?" Catherine thought that he was talking about the walk she had promised him. She replied that she had waited a very long time, had gone out first and waited until dusk, but His Majesty had not deigned to spare the time, and she had the thought that perhaps he had seen everything. The emperor asked if she had really been waiting for him, to which she answered in the affirmative. He was silent. She saw his mysterious smile and wondered why it appeared. He then replied that he had a reason for not coming, after which she felt relieved and realized that he most likely had not seen anything. So Catherine said that she was really sorry that he hadn't gotten to see Lake Perium, but she had to go. He asked if she was really going to leave. This situation reminded her of something. He also said that the princes were already waiting for them with refreshments. When she replied that she had urgent business, he asked if she didn't spend her time staring at the lake all the time. After which, he suggested that she eat something sweet and make her face softer, otherwise anyone looking would think that she had been tortured to death. After this, Catherine's memories awoke. She had recently said this phrase. They sat on the terrace. Everyone tried to treat her to tea and were extremely attentive. Catherine apologized. She didn't know that he was with other princes in front of the pastry shop that day, although even then this situation seemed unusual to her. On the other hand, men are standing in line for cakes. What could be unusual about that? She apologized for any rude things she might have said to him. He replied that he believed her, otherwise he would not have drunk tea with her. However, he said that she should pay him back, and she thought that she had done nothing wrong. I thought to myself that it would be great if she returned home safe and sound. At the same time she tried to maintain her sanity. She definitely didn't like the emperor. She thought that even though she was defending her authority that day, she was also trying to treat them with the sweets she had bought. The emperor's eyes did not warm up. She continued to make excuses, but this did not bring any success. Her words of apology fell on deaf ears, so she began to get nervous. There were a large number of cakes on the table, but she could not touch them due to lack of appetite. However, the emperor seemed to be thinking about something completely different, as if she had hurt his feelings. Catherine explained her behavior by the fact that she had not left the castle for a long time. He asked if she did it because she was thinking about the dead duke. She answered in the affirmative, noting that the loss was enormous for her. One of the principals offered her a handkerchief, which she gladly accepted. She thought to herself that it was really great that she, Haniel, had such brothers. However, at that moment they heard the grinding of iron and turned around. The mad emperor looked at them, drawing his sword. His brother asked him to calm down, noting that they had not yet made sure, but he did not finish what. He put away his sword, but she realized that she needed to think about this situation some more. However, the emperor apparently thought differently. Even though everyone was sitting peacefully, there was tension in the air. Catherine recalled that the emperor himself had said that the incident in the city was simply a misunderstanding. Afterwards, he reminded her that he would regret it if he did not see the lake that she wanted to show him. She was confused because she was not the main character, who is usually poor but smart and independent. Catherine was an ordinary lady who had 3 children, 2 of whom were unwanted. Taking a small sip of tea, she tried to gain time to think about what was going on. Everyone was looking at her with a piercing gaze, which left her in shock. It was as if they were waiting to hear some important prophecy from her, which he simply did not have. The silence dragged on. She couldn't know that they were waiting for the witch to show herself. Nevertheless, she looked at them, trying to keep a straight face. However, with each passing moment it became more and more difficult. It seemed to her that she was in some kind of madness. The emperor said something vague. He seemed sad and she became nervous. Afterwards I got scared and thought, could someone really want to kill His Majesty? None of the 3 expected this turn of events, so they stared at her. She realized that she had said something stupid, but it was taken too seriously. One of the brothers asked how she knew this, and Catherine thought to herself that a large number of people probably wanted to kill such a tyrant. However, she was smart enough to keep quiet about it, so the situation became calmer. She decided that she had nothing to lose. After all, the 3 most powerful men in this empire were staring at her. Catherine decided to quote words from the book, which sounded like looking at the endless nature of the north. There are things that you feel without anyone saying anything, like the flow of a wide blue lake. In this way, she hoped to somehow prolong her life, but it was cut short. The silence continued, and it was even more ominous than before. Catherine did not understand what the emperor was thinking. There was not a single thought in her head. She understood that it would be unwise to start talking about his younger sister now. He looked at her intently from different angles, but did not say anything out loud. The silence dragged on and began to get boring. She thought it was time for her to get out of here. However, she was able to withstand his gaze, despite all his firmness. After this, the emperor suddenly said that she could go, and that it would be better to put off the rest of the story for later. The Viscount was supposed to see him out, but as soon as she took a step, something unexpected happened. Before saying goodbye, she curtsied and said the necessary words. Having asked permission to take her leave, she looked at the emperor. However, something unfortunate happened here. She simply stumbled and almost fell. The emperor, with his quick reaction, managed to catch her. It was a big surprise. She didn't know how to react in such a situation. He said he was thinking of letting her go, but maybe he should finish what he started. After which he noted that, apparently, she simply did not want to leave. However, she broke free and said that he thought she tried to leave them. She understood that if she was caught, she would definitely die. So I decided to leave this strange meeting as quickly as possible and go home. The emperor's face darkened noticeably, but she managed to take a step. She didn't show much elegance when she left. It was more like running away. The powers that be and this empire looked at her through the gate. The princes feared that something was wrong with the emperor and tried to grab his hand. However, he replied that he was not entirely sure that she was a witch and that her black hair seemed to be natural. The other princes also thought that she was not so scary and evil, but the emperor thought that she most likely had magic. Returning to the castle, the first thing she did was rush to her baby. She grabbed her in her arms and said that she missed her very much. Selena was worried. She thought that the emperor wanted to take their baby. However, Haniel herself said that she will not go because her brother is ugly. She loves her mother and wants to stay with her. Catherine replied that the baby would definitely stay with her. She wanted to take care of her, love her, and give her everything she deserved. She then added that this is precisely why mothers cannot get sick, even if they are in pain, because this is what family is. Eventually, she fell asleep. Selena offered to move her, but Catherine wanted to sit with her a little longer. The curious duck began to ask what His Majesty actually said, because the princes had also arrived, and they were already so scary. Catherine realized that they weren't exactly scary. But how can I say this? All the brothers were somehow strange. They stared at people. Selena suggested that maybe Madame was just too beautiful, but she understood that it was something completely different. They acted like they were on a witch hunt, like she was a criminal. Remembering everything that had happened, Catherine thought that one of the brothers seemed to want to pull her hair out at the first opportunity. However, she realized that even if they wanted to do this and were not embarrassed, the one with the most beautiful eyes would not allow it. Selena noted that Madame's face turned red, and she realized that she was giving herself away. She replied that she was just a little scared. Lately, she feels like she's about to die once a day. The duck noted that Catherine was still raising a princess, which was probably too difficult. She said that her life used to be much calmer, but now she feels much warmer. This is how she could describe her condition, because she liked it more than before. She didn't want to lose it because she finally had the desire to make someone's life the safest and happiest. After which she announced that she needed to pack her things. They were moving. Selena's help was questionable, but she still needed her by her side. However, the duck wanted to know what finally happened between Catherine and His Majesty. She couldn't quite articulate her emotions about the gathering, but she said he was big, scary, and strong. The last word caught Selena's attention. She decided to clarify in what sense he was strong. Catherine hesitated, and then Selena decided to ask if she had decided where they were going. The duck reminded them that Rana would not leave them alone so easily, but Catherine understood that she simply needed to survive. However, seeing that the duck was having doubts, she decided to ask what had happened because before she wanted to leave, but now she was hesitating. Selena answered whether she really thought this was the best option, since the princess would soon have her inauguration ceremony. Catherine was shocked because she was planning how they could escape together and survive, and Selena at this time was thinking about such trifles. She recalled that she herself had previously been unenthusiastic about the very thought of Lady Mallow, but now she was fixated on education. She did not argue, saying that the princess should go to school. At that moment, the little girl woke up and asked again if she was really going to study. Catherine picked her up and hugged her sweetly, looking at her sleepy face. She repeated her question, to which Catherine replied that she didn't have to go since she was so afraid of the teacher. However, Haniel surprised her greatly by saying that it was not Teacher Malou that she was afraid of. After which she declared that she was very good. Selena decided that their princess was still dreaming. Like a true nanny, she said that she needed to wash her face first and also clear her nose. This guardianship surprised Catherine, but the duck had apparently already gotten used to the role of nanny. She felt like something was wrong from the start, so she told her to put Haniel down and follow her. Haniel stood up for Selena. She said that she loves her nanny very much and it's very scary when her mother screams like that. After which she continued that she had a good nanny and that she took good care of her. She was always there, and in the palace there was another nanny who always scolded and screamed if Haniel did not sleep and frightened her. The baby snuggled up to Selena again and said that she really liked the new nanny. Then Catherine told the duck to just cry. She knew her whole story. But the little girl immediately began to console her new nanny, who asked her mistress for forgiveness, after which she said that she did not deserve to be near the princess, as she wanted to put her to bed quickly so that she could eat the remaining fish. However, she did not fool the owner, who understood that she simply wanted to get out of it. After which she wondered if the nanny in the imperial palace really behaved like that. Then Haniel began to tell her. At the palace, the nanny told her that Haniel should not call her because she was tired, and that she should not ask for food if she was hungry, and should not open her eyes. Catherine couldn't believe that such a pretty girl could be treated like that. She didn't understand from the very beginning why she was so attached to her mother, but it turns out that he didn't have a single person who would be attached to her. Catherine asked why the little girl didn't say anything to her brother. He was strong. She replied that when her brother came to her, he treated the dog terribly. Trying to calm her down, she asked what exactly he had done. It was Brother Rashid who brought a big dog to her. The little princess was still very shy, so the adults tried to get her to talk and asked if he had really told the dog to bite her. She replied that she would not bite. He told her to come closer to her, which made Haniel very scared. The baby was indeed very shy and fearful, but it was unfair to use such cruel measures. Catherine and Selena wondered how anyone could do that to a small child. The Duchess realized that she understood the little princess's speech much worse than her nanny. The little girl then went on to say that the maids were constantly taking her food for themselves. After that, she asked if she would go to school, but Catherine said that they would go to a school on a completely different lake, where she could make new friends. The little girl agreed. She said that she knew everything and was ready to do as needed. The palace nanny said that Haniel couldn't go to school. She said that she was a crybaby, a naughty child, so she would never have friends. Catherine couldn't stand it and said that they would definitely send her to school as soon as possible. After which she told them to go to the lake first. She couldn't escape in daylight. Having agreed to meet at the reed beds where first graders gather, they parted ways. She promised Haniel that she would come before the sun was over her head. Catherine again told her to call her a black swan, which left the little girl in a constant state of confusion. She explained that she should be called that in front of other people, but when they were alone, they could call her Mom. Having said a few more parting words, she picked up the suitcase to hide it in the reeds. She was in a hurry, so she didn't notice that someone was following her. However, then she heard a familiar, unpleasant voice, which made her stop. Without even looking back, she realized that it was her eldest daughter who had decided to follow her. When Catherine asked why she was there, she replied that she assumed that after her last outburst, she would again decide to wander wherever she wanted. After which she noted that Catherine had become too bold. There was no point in hoping that she would be able to escape again. Catherine reminded her not to be too rude, but Rana stopped her. She said that she had become too arrogant after exchanging a few words with His Majesty, after which she stated that she should have been grateful for being left alive. Catherine couldn't help but be sarcastic, so she said that she shouldn't take out her anger on other people because of her unrequited love. Rania flared up and again showered her with threats, promising to kill her if she did not obey. After that, she noted that most likely Catherine had decided to run away again. It was not for nothing that she had dressed up as if she were going to a picnic. She was too perceptive. Besides, she said that she could end her life on this lake just as she began it. After that, she demanded to open the basket. Noting that she would leave the contents to her as compensation, she just needed to know what was in there. Catherine was indignant and asked if she really thought she could steal something. Rania said that soon her wizard would come looking for her, the same one who gave wings to her stepmother. Catherine asked if she really wanted to turn her into a black swan forever. The daughter replied that she needed a human mother, but she didn't have to be 100% human. It turns out that she planned to change her body to make her as unattractive as possible. After all, no one will pay attention to a duchess who wears a witch mask. So she demanded that this basket be opened immediately. She needed to see what was in there. If Catherine didn't steal anything, she has nothing to hide. Otherwise, she'll have to get on her knees and beg for forgiveness. Catherine even thought that maybe it would be easier to do it that way, but she didn't want to. Although she wanted to die even less. She didn't understand why she had to apologize to this naughty girl who was already losing her temper. Rania again demanded to see the contents of the basket and threatened to cut off her hands for stealing. Catherine gave in and said that she agreed she would show what was in this basket. But at that moment, an unexpected guest appeared. Looking at the confused Duchess, who was at the mercy of her stepdaughter, the Emperor thought that she did not realize to whom she should obey. After he appeared before them, the women immediately bowed their heads. No one expected his appearance, especially at such an unpleasant moment when the Duchess was completely unable to control herself. However, she decided that now everything was clear to him, and he decided to intervene in what was happening. Rania wondered why he had come here trying to make the most graceful bow, but he noted that it looked like the two women were arguing, and then asked what the reason for their discord was. He also noticed that there were thorny thorns and bushes growing around that he had not noticed before. The stepdaughter immediately tried to get out of the situation dryly, declaring that it was just a misunderstanding. However, the Emperor was not one to joke with. He asked directly what he could have misunderstood in this conversation. Rania began to disentangle herself, claiming that he thought she had raised her voice at her mother. She said that it wasn't really like that. It was a pretty sweet family scene. The prince grinned and said that she shouted at the Duchess to give her the basket. Or maybe she raised her voice because she tried to escape and stole something valuable. Rania didn't expect him to hear so much. She asked permission to explain everything. The Emperor agreed to listen, after which she stated that her mother was not quite well. She constantly held picnics away from home, so she simply offered to carry the basket. She turned to Catherine, hoping that she would support her, but the prince cut her off and said that he thought he saw something completely different. After this, he asked the Duchess to tell him how things really happened. "I never thought that I would act this way," but she immediately said that her daughter was telling the truth. She understood that she had to choose the lesser of two evils, but for some reason her stepdaughter seemed weaker. So she said that she didn't want to stay home alone, so she decided to go for a walk with her daughter. She grabbed her hand and said that today was a wonderful day for a picnic. After this, Catherine stated that she could now return the basket to her daughter. Holding it out, she declared that it contained something that her dear daughter liked very much. Rania had already reached out to expose the Duchess for theft right in front of the Emperor. The plan could never have been better. However, what she saw shocked her, but Catherine sarcastically asked why she was pretending to be surprised. After which she assumed that she was probably just embarrassed, because there was a lot of dried fish in the basket. She said she had prepared it for her daughter, who so impatiently snatched the basket from her hand. In fact, it was the best treat she had ever prepared for Haniel, but they were not something a human could enjoy. Continuing to play her part, Catherine insisted that Rania try it, but she claimed that she was not hungry. Catherine insisted, and as a result she could not refuse in any way, but still held her position. The Duchess loudly declared that these were her eldest daughter's favorite treats, so I should not refuse, because they were prepared with love for her. The Emperor began to look at her with bewilderment, so Rania understood that there would be nowhere to go. He suggested that she should not be shy, since she liked this food so much, she could try it. It was not for nothing that she tried so hard to snatch this basket from the Duchess's hands. It must have been necessary. It happened. Rania gave in. She reached out and took one of the fish. She even had to bite it off, which miraculously prevented her from vomiting on the spot. Then the Emperor would have been completely lost to him. Catherine couldn't help but be sarcastic as she asked if she liked the food. However, Rania apologized and said that she had something urgent to do, so she had to leave. At that moment the prince turned to Catherine, and she thought to herself that the fox had gone away, and only the tiger remained. She stated that perhaps her daughter was very busy since she had left, leaving all these delicacies. She usually does not behave like that. Then the emperor noted that since her daughter had left them, she too had nowhere to rush to. Otherwise, you might think that she is actually trying to escape somewhere. She understood that now she had fallen into a new trap. However, the emperor stated that the lady was behaving extremely stupidly, which is why she decided to ask the reason for such an opinion. He said that it was impossible to stop a man who was planning to escape. After that, he began to draw his sword from its sheath, which made Catherine's heart go cold. However, he simply cut down all the thorny bushes, making the path clear to the exit. Catherine was still wondering how she could use the emperor for her own purposes, but he had no plans to leave. He stated that the Duchess most likely had no reason to escape. He hit her in her most vulnerable spot. She was already completely confused, but he continued his sentence. The emperor stated that she would not dare to escape until they finished their conversation, since she did not have many lives. Seeing her confused look, he asked if he hadn't warned her about what might happen to her, after which he stated that he himself would set the price that she was supposed to indicate. The Duchess could not go far without breaking the promise she made to the emperor. She agreed, after which he told her to tell him why she was here. Catherine tried to justify herself and said that she was just out for a walk, to which the prince noted that she looked too dressed up for that. She was embarrassed because she never thought that anything interesting could be seen in her black clothes. However, he asked again why she was dressed so brightly and flashily. Looking at him, Catherine did not understand why he was angry. Besides, the decoration that was on her head, she did not steal, but made from her own feathers. He changed the subject again and asked where she was going. She silently thought that she was going to his little sister's entrance ceremony, and now she was more afraid not of this terrible man, but of the little Princess Haniel, who was looking for her alone because she had made a promise. She asked him to let her go, then she would come herself next time. When he asked why he should do this, she answered that she would tell him the details later. The Duchess simply said that in return she would do whatever he wanted if only he would let her go now. He didn't understand why she was rushing off to such a great deal, but it seemed that he was changing his mind. Then he said that she didn't have to go alone, he could accompany her. At this moment, Lady Mello was lining up the students. The new ones had to stand next to each other. Selena calmed the baby as best she could, saying that her mother would definitely come. Lady Mello immediately took notice of her, calling her by her name, Rana. After that, she asked why the baby was silent, since she had seen her before. She started mumbling and ended up calling her a dialectologist instead of the director, for which she was already reprimanded. The lady immediately said that she would not be able to survive on the lake if she was capricious. Haniel became completely dejected and tried to apologize. However, she said it wrong and was corrected again, which made her even more embarrassed. Another Swan came towards us. It was Mr. Darren. The parents of the first graders waited impatiently. He told Lady Mello to calm them down personally. She replied that she would now calm one of the little ones and the ceremony would begin. Mr. Darren offered his help. He leaned over to Haniel and introduced himself. After that, he asked if she wanted to tell him something, to which he asked if her mother had come. Then she corrected herself and said that it was not Mom, but a black swan she had to come to her. They crossed their fingers in a promise. Since Mr. Darren didn't understand what she was talking about, she explained that it was a very large, beautiful black swan. Others started saying that she shouldn't lie. She didn't have a mother. Everyone knew that she came with a nanny. She tried to justify herself by saying that she had a mother, but children can be very mean. They said that the black swan is the Duchess. She can't be her mother because she is black and that one is white. At that moment, the voice of her beloved mother was heard, who announced that she had arrived. She ran to her as fast as she could, trying to please and comfort her. After that, she knelt down, apologized to the little girl, and said that she kept her promise. The emperor stood behind a tree at that moment and wondered why he should even look at this, and what he expected from her. He thought that she was in a hurry to perform some urgent ritual, or rather, he wanted to find out who she wanted to meet. He hadn't yet admitted it to himself, but it seemed that he was jealous of her. But in fact, she simply came to the very same chick that was with her before. The emperor decided to step out from the shadows of the trees, threatening to punish her if she tried to deceive him. She stopped him, demanding that he stay where she asked him to be, as she was afraid of Haniel's reaction. The emperor did not understand whether she was really trying to give orders to her master. She suddenly remembered who he was, bowed her head, and asked for forgiveness. Then she said that she just asked him to wait a little. He shouldn't have come all this way in the first place. She said that he shouldn't show himself so that these animals wouldn't get scared, otherwise he wouldn't understand why she was in a hurry. The emperor thought that he had never seen such a strange woman, but he really wanted to know why she was behaving like this. They just stood there and watched. He wanted to find out what would happen next. He thought it was a strange, incomprehensible ritual. It was definitely not connected with dark magic. Then he asked if she had come all this way to look at the birds. Catherine replied that they were all different species and very different from each other, but if you looked closely, you could see a special and very cute bird. His Majesty thought that this had already gone beyond the bounds of absurdity, but it was becoming quite funny. What was even stranger was the fact that they had come all this way just to stand under a tree. He understood that he could not understand this woman in any way, but she became more and more interesting. Now, as she watched these birds, she was simply delightful, even more beautiful than when she came dressed up for the banquet in honor of His Majesty. She was somehow inspired, enthusiastic, so the prince simply tried to understand. He asked if these were her birds, that is, if she looked after them. After all, he had seen a small white bird in her hands before, deciding to find out if it had some special meaning. She replied that they were all beautiful, and some were just very cute. By some she meant the smallest white one from which a beautiful swan was to grow. They stood there, shifting from foot to foot, the prince trying to run this information through his head. However, the process was slow. He was unable to do it, nevertheless he tried hard. Catherine, however, paid absolutely no attention to him, completely absorbed in what was happening. However, he asked her another question, and she had to turn around. At this moment, Lady Mello was lining up the students in front of her for the initiation ceremony. The emperor asked if she really liked these ducks so much, to which he received an indignant cry. She said it was a swan, but the emperor could be forgiven for not knowing the difference between species. He kept looking at her and didn't understand, but she lowered her eyes, avoiding his gaze. Out of habit, when he was angry, he again placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready to fight. And no matter how he watched, he saw only the lake and the birds, and she had some kind of strange reaction. A thought flashed through his head, and he decided to quickly head in their direction. Catherine tried to stop him, but he was already right in front of them. He looked at the birds, which were still just chicks, completely different if you looked closely. However, his gaze was drawn to the very one the Duchess had told him about. It reminded him of something. At first he didn't understand, but the white swan had already jumped into the water. He looked at him with red, quivering pupils that looked like human ones. However, the bird seemed to turn to stone and without moving began to drown in the river. He did not understand, because it was not a doll, it should be able to swim. The emperor wondered if there was anything special about the fact that this bird was raised by a witch, but for some reason it could not swim. The Duchess came running and saw that her little girl was not able to cope with her task, that she would simply drown and leave her forever. With a loud scream, she threw herself into the water, right in her dress, but did not see where her baby had gone. She wondered to herself what he could have done that made the child start to drown even by looking at him. Cursing, she kept trying to find the baby, but she felt someone grab her from behind. The emperor pressed me to himself and told me to move away because that way she simply wouldn't be able to find her. He told her that she might not hold on, but at least she shouldn't resist. After which he said that if she wanted to find this bird, she needed to listen to him. It would be faster. The Duchess said that she fell somewhere there. He noted that he also remembered. She was already mentally praying for the baby to stay alive. She promised to do everything so that she would live. At that moment, the emperor pulled his hand out of the water and showed the chick. Catherine kept asking her to open her eyes, saying out loud that Mom was here. When Haniel called her, she hugged the emperor in delight. After that, she thanked all the gods for two things. The first was that there was a man nearby, whom she was now hugging with both arms. The second thing was that she could hear her baby. She looked at the emperor and suddenly felt that some previously unknown emotions were awakening within her. He looked down and understood that the woman couldn't just run after the chick. Apparently, he meant too much to her. When she ran, she screamed that this was her daughter. He did not understand how this was possible, but decided to simply accept this truth. The Duchess removed her hand from his shoulder, and they all walked back together. At this time, the geese were all alarmed, and Lady Malou tried to attack the emperor. She wanted to approach him, but he, afraid that the birds would attack him, pushed Lady Mello away. He didn't understand why there was such a fuss over one little bird, or whether the Duchess was in her right mind at all. She thought that if he knew that it was his younger sister, he would speak differently. However, she told him that perhaps for His Majesty, it was just a bird, but for her it was the only member of the family who was more precious than her own life. He didn't understand anything, but decided to throw his cloak over her shoulders since she was completely wet. The Duchess tried to refuse, but he said that otherwise she would curse him again. After that, he asked what was so special about this bird. She simply told him that it was not just an ordinary bird, but when the emperor asked what was the matter, she did not know what to answer. A few moments later, when she had caught her breath, she said that it was a living creature. It had eyes and ears, and as an adult she was obliged to protect it. They walked slowly and suddenly found themselves very close to her castle. The emperor told her to first call the servants and order them to prepare a bath and food. Confused, Catherine asked if he really wanted to enter the castle. He looked back at her and thought that this woman was absolutely strange. Catherine froze at the building, where there was no light and no hint of anything alive. Everything was hung with dried fish. Was this really what the emperor was supposed to see? At that moment, her daughter began to move in her arms and said that she was afraid of her brother. Catherine realized that she had no options. She said that she was left completely alone since the Duke was gone, and the presence of someone else in her house could cause him misunderstanding. The emperor turned to her, looked her in the eye, and said that if she didn't want him to come in, she could have said so. After that, he told her to keep her promise to him, turned around and left. As she watched his retreating figure, Catherine thought that when they were in the water, his voice had been like a dream. She recalled these moments again and again, and it seemed to her that he was not such a tyrant as he was described. However, she thought that maybe she just heard it wrong, but she still needed to warm the baby up quickly. She was left alone near her castle, in which there was not a single living soul, in which she lived completely alone, during the day in the guise of a man, at night in the guise of a swan. And now, even in the presence of her baby, she suddenly felt that she did not want the emperor to leave. When he returned, everyone around asked what had happened and began giving orders to prepare a bath and food. The emperor demanded that this noise stop at that moment. More than anything, he wanted to think about what had happened. However, the bustle around did not stop. Someone demanded that brandy be brought quickly and that the fireplaces be lit. His brothers were worried that he was ill, but they did not dare ask what had happened. He looked at him with an unusually thoughtful gaze, in which there was not a drop of anger. He told them to do whatever was necessary and then asked them to leave him alone. Heading to the castle, Catherine wondered what had happened between them that he couldn't get out of her thoughts. His brothers couldn't get rid of him, asking if he had suddenly fallen into the water or if he had been attacked. He kept going over it all in his head. It was nothing more than a little bird falling into the water. He remembered grinning at the stupid woman, and then everything was like a fog. And when he touched this little bird, he felt something that he still could not explain to himself. The younger brother noticed his complexion and asked if he had a fever. He told him to shut his mouth, and quite rudely. He thought to himself that the bird was, after all, a living creature, and perhaps that was why he felt such strange feelings. Then I wondered how far this witch could go, what kind of magic she had conjured up. While undressing, he kept thinking about this incident and did not know how to feel about it. However, in his hand, he still had a small red bow, the same one that had been on the little swan before. He handed it to his brothers and told them to clean it like the rest of their clothes. The rest of us were about to leave so that His Majesty could rest, but he stopped them. He told them to bring all these clothes to him later, including the satin ribbon. At this point, Selina worriedly informed Madame that she could not find the princess's ribbon. Catherine replied that there was nothing to be done. Then the nanny replied that such a ribbon was the only one of its kind. There was no color redder than hers, and Catherine hugged the baby, and thought that at the moment it didn't matter at all. All her clothes in the closet were black. She also felt a little sorry for this ribbon, but she could have just gone to the market to buy it. So there was no need to make a big deal out of such a trifle, but Selena wanted to know what happened, why they didn't run away. She asked if Lady Rana had caught her. Catherine replied that yes, something like that had happened. At the same time, Selena was surprised that she was able to escape from her stepdaughter and remain safe. How could this happen? She thought that it was something else, but she didn't say it out loud. She still had too many things to do. The baby was under a lot of stress. We had to take care of her. Otherwise, what kind of mother would she be? She lifted her up and asked if she was okay, if she could talk. She began to tell something, but Catherine did not understand her at all. It was in a childish, babbling language. Haniel said that as soon as her brother came out of the tree, she was scared and couldn't move. She was so confused that she started to drown and could do nothing about it. Selena assumed she simply froze, something many children did when they were scared. Catherine thought that it wasn't just children who did this. She herself behaved in exactly the same way. She petted her baby, and Selena said that she had nothing to worry about, but that she would most likely be sick. Selena continued to say something. She was extremely proud of herself, but Catherine's thoughts were occupied with something else. She was surprised that the Emperor had such a character trait, because he rushed after her to save a bird that had no meaning to him. She stroked Selena on the withers. Haniel asked her to stroke her too, seeing how good the duck was feeling. Catherine hugged her baby and thought that maybe he wasn't so scary after all. They should be friends. At this time, in another castle, a completely different conversation was taking place between two sisters. Rebecca demanded that Rana take the necessary measures. However, it was as if she didn't hear her. She was completely lost in her thoughts. Rebecca was somewhat worried, but then Rana came back to reality and asked what had happened to Ronan. She replied that what did it matter now if she had to carry out her sister's orders. Rana noted that Rebecca chose to do this herself, so now it is her personal work. She was ordered to keep an eye on this woman so that she would never dare to even think about escaping again. In general, the Duke's youngest daughter did not understand how she dared because she had always been quite a coward. Perhaps her sister had been too much of a pest, and Rebecca had also suggested that perhaps it had not been an escape at all, since there had been nothing but fish in the basket. Rana got angry and slammed her fist on the table. She didn't want to explain to her slow-witted sister what was really going on. Not expecting such a reaction, Rebecca became nervous, but realized that she had no choice. At that moment, someone came in. Rana invited him to come in since he was already in the office. Rebecca's face changed when she saw who had come. She was clearly not happy about this visit. This did not bother him at all, as he simply noted that the little lady was not happy about his visit. He said that she was probably still sulking over the incident that happened between them recently. She cried out, noting that he did not dare to speak so rudely to a lady, but Rana said that Rebecca had her own business. The younger Duchess herself was glad to leave this company. Turning around to look at her, the visitor noted that the little lady was, as always, very energetic, but Rana interrupted him. He laughed and said that it seemed that Lady Rana was also full of energy today. She asked him if he had checked, and he replied that the rest of the hedge had been neatly cut. It is not difficult to guess who could do this so neatly and quickly. Only His Majesty's sword could do it. Rana grabbed her head and said it was going to burst, as if she didn't have enough problems with Catherine. The man replied that she didn't think that His Majesty was together with his stepmother, to which she only laughed. She remembered that the Emperor felt only irritation and indifference towards women. For him, they had no other meaning. This was evident from the casual glance he cast from afar, and it was even for the best. The distance he kept gave her enough time. In any case, before this, everything was calm, and Catherine understood her place and did not cross the line. That is why no action has been taken until now, but now she has dared to challenge and is even trying to escape. The man was surprised. Did she really dare to take such a step? Rana snapped at him. She said that her stepmother was ready to fall on her knees before her until the Emperor appeared, which means she had an intention. The man asked her to calm down and suggested coming up with another plan. She replied that after his increase cut the barbed wire fence, she could not reinstall it, otherwise he might get angry with her. Ronan noted that at such moments even Rana begins to reason like a typical lady. She demanded that he speak directly without riddles, to which he said that when it came to the emperor, she lost her clarity of mind. Then Rania thought, because before Catherine knew that if she left this place, it would be the end for her, so why did she suddenly start behaving like this? The man reminded her that the Duchess had always feared death more than anything else, but something had changed now. If a woman who is of sound mind and has nothing to lose suddenly decides to risk her life to escape, then there is a reason more important than life itself. At that moment, Duchess Catherine was playing with her daughter in the castle. However, she suddenly became upset and said that she was not there. She was lost. Catherine again didn't understand what was going on until her daughter said there was no bow, after which she said that he was now with his brother and that he could not be returned. Catherine couldn't decide whether the loss of the ribbon upset her or not, but at least she had come to terms with her brother's presence. When she sighed heavily, Selina asked what needed to be done. Why such a heavy sigh? The Duchess did not answer, but Selina immediately noted that the princess had already missed several classes in a row. Catherine noted that it was just a short sick leave due to shock. At the same time, Lady Mello herself received a blow from the Emperor and fell ill, but Selina noted that such things should be discussed with the class teacher. The Duchess was surprised and asked if her daughter really had a class teacher. The baby's nanny was outraged by the fact that her mother was not interested in her school affairs, after which she answered in the affirmative. She wanted to know who he was and asked if he treated her well, to which she received the answer that he was very good and helped her a lot. She said that he saved her from the water, but Catherine corrected her and said that her brother did it. The little girl said again that her brother was scary and that he shouldn't come. Catherine, seeing how her daughter was frightened at the thought of him, thought that it was worth at least trying to make peace with him. However, it was quite difficult to do this at the moment, because she herself was in a difficult situation, hiding the little princess. Selina said that it would be a good idea for her to take some medicine, but the Duchess decided that she had no time to be sick. Then the nanny asked what her plans were now, because apparently the escape would no longer be possible. A new plan was needed. Catherine replied that she already had it, but did not voice it. She understood that in her case, it was better not to plan anything, since everything was going wrong. She realized that it was time to focus on ordinary things, and now she set herself the goal of ensuring that the little one does not miss classes. All these days, she did not go to school because she had a temperature. However, now she had to be a good and obedient girl, but she remembered the bow again and started whining. The Duchess asked if she was so upset, and she replied that it was a memory of her mother. Catherine said that she would definitely buy her a new one, after which they both became upset. Selina couldn't stand to look at it, so she decided to unravel her nest, because if you take it apart, you can make something like a ribbon. Catherine said that she had spent too much effort to assemble it, but the duck's answer was categorical. The news that the baby would have a new bow made everyone happy and gave them determination. The duck was already heading towards her nest, but she froze on the threshold. Catherine already thought that she had changed her mind, regretting her decision, but then something unexpected happened. Selina turned and walked back towards them with the basket. At this time, in the imperial palace, one of the younger princes was reporting to His Majesty. He said that he delivered everything as requested and left it at the door. The emperor asked what the reaction was, but he replied that there was only one duck. She didn't peck him or run away, so he simply left the basket and walked away. The emperor asked if it was really a duck. Perhaps it was a swan after all, but the younger brother replied that it looked more like a duck. After that, I thought about how their older brother was able to distinguish these birds, and in general, his behavior had become suspicious lately, especially after returning from the lake that very day. He spent most of his time in his room, which worried his younger brothers. They thought maybe he had caught a cold that day. Besides, he had set out on a journey right after the battle, so it was no wonder that his body could not withstand it. At the same time, they also noticed that her face was redder than usual. They thought that the problem was with that witch. He asked how the stone was behaving, and was told that it was unchanged, but had become brighter. From this it was concluded that she was fine at the moment, but since she was only 3 years old, she needed to be found before she had any bad memories. One of the brothers suggested that the Duchess was involved, but the emperor firmly stated that this could not be. Then they asked him if he really thought she was not a witch. He replied that he was convinced that she was a witch, but she was not that strong. Then one of the brothers decided that he would keep a closer eye on her, which provoked an angry reaction from the emperor. He said he shouldn't do it, he didn't want her to be scared, after which he stated that he would look after her himself and that they should not interfere. He was asked if he had learned anything about her, but he could not answer anything meaningful. All he knew was that she loved birds very much, was simply obsessed with them. After that, I wondered what they had that made them deserve her such strong love. One of the brothers noted that some black magic practitioners use birds as minions. However, the emperor thought that there was something different here, since she treated them like family, like her children. One way or another, the emperor decided that she was a strange woman who could not tell the difference and did not know fear. When asked how the emperor planned to proceed in the future, he replied that he had already thrown her the bait. The younger brother asked if this was the basket that had been delivered to her today. The prince answered in the affirmative. He was sure that she would bite because this basket contained everything she lacked. Selena was delighted. It was the first time she had seen such a beautiful cake, but the Duchess told her not to touch it. She would return everything back. However, she understood that the emperor had arranged for her everything he had asked of her that day after they had gotten wet in the lake. He told the servants to prepare a towel and start preparing the soup. So in the basket she found soap and bath oil. Apparently he thought that the poor witch had finally sunk to the bottom. After all, the Duke's wife, who lives in an empty country house without a single servant, cannot be adequate. Perhaps the emperor even decided that she had sunk to absolute rock bottom, since there was no one to look after her. Selena continued to unpack the basket, and at that moment she found something amazing. It was a satin ribbon that her daughter had lost, and she had already put it on herself. Catherine was shocked by this act, which once again convinced her that the emperor could not be a monster. She decided to go to meet Lady Mello as she needed to carry out one plan. She said that her baby had been through a lot of shock that day, and that she needed a little encouragement. The goose recalled that the emperor had kicked her, which had left her in great shock. She asked why the emperor decided to visit this lake. Catherine decided to say that she didn't know either. As a result, the Duchess tried to appease the old goose as best she could, since she needed to get something from her. However, she continued to say that it was a very big scandal at the entrance ceremony, the white swan that almost drowned. While the goose went to fetch the class teacher, the Duchess said that the princess would be accepted to school again. She was very happy. She loved to attend classes, despite the fact that at first she was not successful in anything. At the same time, Selena was worried that the little girl was not trying very hard, and that school could become stressful for her again. However, Catherine was sure that everything would go completely differently, as she had her own plan. At that moment, the princess's class teacher, whose name was Darren, came over to introduce himself. Catherine expressed concern that her daughter was very shy and had difficulty getting used to new people, but she heard only compliments. She was pleased to communicate with this teacher, considering that he turned out to be not as strict as her Lady Mello. However, at that moment she felt many eyes on her and decided that it was time for her to run away before she became a common enemy. The thing is that such an imposing man aroused the interest of all the ducks, including Selena. She kept her eyes on him, but she still became worried when the Duchess decided to go. She said that she could stay at home because no one was forcing her, but she had made a promise. She headed towards the emperor's castle before he himself went looking for her. She was met by a butler who informed her that His Majesty was waiting for her. Catherine was sure that with his gift he wanted her to come and personally admit her guilt. However, she still did not understand what his secret intentions were. She did not know that he considered her a witch. At the same time, the emperor did not express his emotions in any way. He was completely cold and detached. When she froze in the doorway, he asked why she didn't come in. She was surprised why he was acting so normal. At least she thought he would want to stab her. She bowed to him but caused him to look displeased. After which, she said that she understood that the emperor could not have good feelings for her. Because of her, he fell into the water. The emperor realized that this was not all, so he asked her to continue. She replied that she could no longer live in such fear, so if he had any demands on her, he could communicate them. She said that she wouldn't be able to return the money for the tape, but she was ready to work it off. She had time from noon until 6 in the evening, and while leafing through the papers, he thought. He said that he would give her the opportunity to do this, after which he ordered her to sit down at the table. His other order was to take a knife and cut the meat that was already on the platter. She sat at the table and wondered if he had decided to feed her first and then mock her. However, realizing that she had nowhere to go, she decided to continue to stick to her guns. Seeing her concern, he noted that he had no intention of harming her. After this, he wished her bon appetit and suggested that they begin their meal. After tasting a piece, she was delighted. She had never tasted anything like it. After which, she thought with regret that she could only offer her princess dried fish, no matter how hard she tried to take good care of her. Seeing her upset expression, he asked what she didn't like again. She replied that everything was fine, after which she asked if they really ate such dishes every day in the palace. He asked how long she had been starving to say such things. Catherine couldn't believe her ears. Had the tyrant really just taken pity on her? After that situation at the lake, she became more and more convinced that he was not an ordinary monster. He, answering her previous question, said that he did not attach much importance to food. These dishes were familiar and disgusting to him. Everyone in the palace ate like that. However, he noted that except for one person who was being looked after by a nanny, Catherine thought, the nanny who did not even let the little princess have a snack. Pretending not to know the situation, Catherine noted that the child was probably still very young since a nanny was taking care of him. The prince replied that she seemed to be 2 years old, although perhaps 4. The Duchess thought he was counting strangely, after which the Emperor said that her mother had died shortly after giving birth, so she was probably about 3. The Emperor said that in any case she had plenty of food, since he had ordered that she be given whatever she asked for. On the one hand, Catherine was glad to hear this, but she asked if he hadn't personally visited her, to which she received the answer that she cried when she saw him. She knew that this was the most truthful thing he had ever told her, but she noted that she couldn't have been crying for no reason. The Duchess suggested that he might have frightened her with something. Maybe he was taking someone with him. He remembered that he had once taken a dog with him. He was convinced that anyone would be delighted with this animal, but Catherine switched back to food, but thought to herself that it was unwise to go to the child with a dog. At this moment, it became at least clear to her that the prince had no desire to scare the little girl. All this was done out of ignorance. However, he decided to remind her that she was now his debtor, and she would have to fulfill any demands. The Emperor asked how she could be useful to him. She replied that she could manage the palace, take care of the garden by the lake, and cook. He said that he already had people for this, after which she noted that she got along well with people, animals, and plants. His Majesty asked if there was anything more special about her, hoping that she would tell him about her magical abilities. She replied that she once raised a huge ostrich from a chicken, and that she also knows how to make fertilizer for plants. After that, she said that she had acting talent, and he answered doubtfully, did she really consider this her advantage? She pretended to be upset, to which he replied that he did not mean to offend her. However, she just laughed and said that she actually considered her skill an advantage. And no matter how hard he tried to pierce her with his gaze at this moment, nothing would come of it. However, he continued to stare without looking away, after which he said that she would not have to do anything special. She should just be herself, come to him every day and spend time with him. Catherine thought she was strange, but he had outdone her now. She tried to say that she didn't have much free time, to which he just laughed, after which he said that her task was to become the reason why he should stay in the north. She was surprised when she heard such plans from him. He said that he had his own reasons for this. She would soon find out about it anyway, so he told her that his younger sister, whom he had spoken about earlier, had disappeared. She should have been surprised, but he noted that her reaction was delayed. Catherine replied that the problem was that it was too unexpected news. The Emperor said that her last traces were found in the north, so until he finds her, he will stay here, but this is a secret that no one should know. The Duchess thought that she was taking care of his sister and doing it secretly, but she did not say anything out loud. The Emperor noted that it appeared that the princess was safe, but he needed to verify this personally. Catherine screamed that he was saying very terrible things, putting all his emotion into it, after which I realized that I had almost given in and tried to put on a normal expression. The Emperor asked if she was really so worried about everyone around her, and she replied that she was the princess of the empire. At the same time, the Emperor noted that if anyone harmed her, he would arrange for him to have a long and difficult death. Catherine noted that he would do well to first reflect on his behavior, since he did not pay attention to his sister when she was around. After that, she asked what her help would consist of, since he was staying in the north. He replied that he needed a reason, since there were already rumors that he was preparing to attack the neighboring kingdom. It was completely unexpected, so Catherine took this information in and realized that it made perfect sense. It turns out that she will become just a cover for him, but in what role was she supposed to act? The emperor also said that no one should know about the missing child. If he fell into their hands, they would start blackmailing him. Catherine put her hand to her heart and thought that he looked quite human at that moment, like he really cared. However, she asked whether her eldest daughter, who was well versed in northern affairs, would not be a better fit for him. The emperor did not answer, but asked what was stopping her from doing it herself. She didn't even have to do anything to do this. Just continue to answer cheekily, create problems, and if nothing helps, just smile. At the same time, he noted that she is a master at avoiding answering questions. Moreover, he might even reward her for the services she rendered to him. She agreed enthusiastically and said that she would try her best. The emperor was still not used to her spontaneity, but he realized that she really would not back down. Later, while walking in the garden, she asked where she should begin her preparations. He did not understand what she was talking about, but she replied that she would have to appear in public and needed to play her role believably. Perhaps she could team up with the North to promote public works, hold a celebration, or inspect a territory or military stronghold. She was determined, so she asked him what he thought she needed to do to be his equal. However, he simply replied that she just needed to come tomorrow. Catherine replied that she would definitely do so, because she had given him her word. He said that if she didn't want to come alone, she could take her daughter with her, and she asked if he was talking about Rana. The emperor replied that he was talking about the white swan chick. She was like a daughter to her, but for some reason she could not take her with her. She suggested that more constructive action should be taken, but the emperor replied that if she came with an animal, it would create the appearance that she was focusing on improving the ecosystem of the north. She saw the shadow of a smile on his face, which made her a little surprised. Then she saw that the princes had arrived. She wanted to greet them, but the emperor stopped her. He reminded her that she was a good actress and that she needed to play one small role for him now. At this moment, the princes rode up on horseback and saw that His Majesty was persistently pressing the Duchess. She was upset, as if she had heard something very bad about herself, after which she seemed ready to burst into tears and could barely restrain herself. It seemed to the princes that such a sincere woman could not be guilty of bad deeds. They were almost convinced that she couldn't be a witch because she was too young and beautiful for that. However, at that moment it happened that she ran away, covering her face with her hand. The emperor was pleased, but did not show it in any way. He looked rather stern. After which he told the visiting princes that even a witch can repent of her misdeeds. The next day, the Duchess arrived at the palace as promised. She was holding a bird with a red bow in her hands, and the emperor looked at her doubtfully. The thing is, she didn't look much like a swan, but the Duchess introduced her as Rana, her daughter. The fact is that the princess began to tremble as soon as she looked at His Majesty, so it was decided to replace her. Selina wasn't thrilled with the plan, but she couldn't get away from it. She was sure that they would both be executed as soon as the deception was revealed, but Catherine was sure that His Majesty would not be able to tell them apart, since he did not understand birds. When she introduced Rana, he asked if the birds really had names. After that, he said that it seemed like she was a different color before. Catherine replied that maybe it was because her feathers were wet. The emperor asked to remove the ribbon, but Catherine reminded him that these birds also have feelings. Therefore, he should not treat her rudely, otherwise he may offend her. He didn't understand at all what was difficult about such a simple request, but he began to doubt it. Catherine replied that she had already said her name, so she should be addressed by her first name. He repeated Raine's name and then decided to let it go as it was. Catherine was glad that she managed to get out of this situation so easily. In fact, she thought that everything would be more difficult. However, he noted that this was too important a name for a bird. Could it be called anything else? Catherine replied that her name was Rana. She needed to get used to it. She asked him if he had any news about his missing sister. He replied that there was none, but the child was completely unaware of his situation. Catherine said that she was only 3 years old. How could she be aware of anything? Then I thought that he wasn't doing it on purpose, he just didn't understand. The emperor asked her what she wanted to talk to him about, and she replied that he had tried calling his little sister affectionately by name. His Majesty asked why he needed it, which even made Selena's face look surprised. She asked how he addressed her before. He simply replied that he was on the informal level. Catherine asked if he had said, "What are you doing? Get up, eat, go to bed," because that didn't happen. He replied that it was not only her that he addressed in this way. Then she asked if his brothers had not asked for anything. Catherine noted that if you address a person by name, you can accurately understand what his heart desires. At this point, the prince said that he understood, after which he noted that the Duchess did not know his name. She was guiding the conversation in another direction, thinking that she needed to somehow help teach him how to communicate with his little sister, but he decided to introduce himself and said that his name was Rashid. She realized that something was wrong with the plan, but decided to act according to the situation. Besides, he was quite sweet at that moment, but she knew that if she had time to say the name that her baby was calling her, she could have been beheaded. Celine kept trying to make her leave, but at that moment, Catherine suddenly realized that with his coldness, which could destroy the entire world, the emperor was actually keeping it as it was. And this was his most positive trait. At that moment, the emperor's younger brothers, who had returned from a mission, entered the room. They noticed the bird, but Catherine replied that she was raising it as her own daughter. She herself looked at one of the princes, the third, she hoped, was behaving better than the first. After which she said that she heard that a large dog lived in their palace, but found out that most of it was kept separately. The younger prince stated that he had suggested to His Majesty that they give this dog to their younger sister, and the Duchess was outraged. At this point, the emperor said how long they would delay the news that the child had still not been found. The proceedings began, and Catherine decided that she probably needed to leave. Selena remained on the table at this time. The emperor took her in his arms and told her to take her away. However, holding it in his hands, he felt that it was not the same bird at all. Looking sternly at Catherine, he said that it did not seem to be her daughter. At that moment, Selena thought that he was not so stupid and was able to distinguish birds. Catherine tried to explain that she was wearing the same ribbon, and that it was indeed the same bird. He just said that the last time he had a completely different feeling when he pulled her out of the lake. He looked her straight in the eye, called her by name, and asked what was going on. She replied that her daughter was a little busy at the moment, so she couldn't take her with her. Besides, the little girl was very afraid and shy. He asked, "Was it really more than this duck, which looked like it was dying?" Catherine replied that Selena was usually very friendly, which was why she had taken her today. When asked why she lied to him, she didn't know what to answer. After that, he asked if she was trying to protect him from her daughter. However, that time he barely touched her. He didn't want to harm her. Catherine replied that she was afraid to upset him because if he loved animals so much, she wanted to please him. When his younger brother said that His Majesty was not like that at all, he asked him to be silent, after which he demanded that she continue. Catherine replied that, although not with her daughter's help, she hoped to please His Majesty a little. When she asked Celine for forgiveness for sending her to the soup, the emperor cried out that she really thought that he would take her life. He told them both to leave immediately, but he would be expecting her again tomorrow. Catherine thought she should run faster while she could, but he stopped her. He told her to bring her daughter the next day, then she would be able to understand if he was really that cruel. Catherine ran as fast as she could, but Selena told her that she was already far enough from the castle. Always one to exaggerate, Catherine said they were almost killed. After that, she said that her acting saved their lives. It seems she is very talented. Looking at her through the window, the emperor thought that she had played well, but she had to do it to the end. At the same time, the princes thought that the Duchess was very frightened and even cried, and her brother put pressure on her. He realized that they had completely failed to notice that it was a game, and all her tearfulness and fear that she will be killed is just acting. But only he could see it. The rest took everything on faith. At this time, there were exercises taking place on the lake, and the class teacher Haniel was explaining how to find food in the lake. However, Haniel did not dive again. One of the ducks tried to force her, but the other protected her. At the same time, Haniel wanted to explain to them that if she remained still, she would be able to swim. In addition, she stubbornly continued to call her mother, and the class teacher noticed her and asked what was going on. Haniel replied that she was fine and that she could swim. She tried to demonstrate without much success, but the teacher was not upset. After that, he asked how much she loved her mother, whether she wanted to stay with her forever. Haniel, as a small child, replied that she wanted to be with her all her life. After that, she saw that her mother had come for her. She would definitely hug her tightly and twirl her around. Looking at her, Teacher Darwin said that it seemed like her mother was not in the mood today. However, the bad mood was due to the fact that Lady Mello said that the little girl was being bullied by her peers. Despite everything, as soon as she saw her daughter, Catherine's spirit immediately perked up. She understood that it would be very difficult for her to bring the baby to her brother tomorrow, so she could not decide what to do. The little girl rushed into her arms and said that she would love her mother all her life. These were new words to her, so Catherine asked her to repeat them. She felt tenderness, feeling how much this little child loved her. She asked to repeat this phrase over and over again, which Haniel did with great pleasure. Looking at them, Selina thought that they were both hopeless. And she reproached Catherine for always living for today, without thinking about the next. However, she became completely despondent, remembering that tomorrow she had to do the impossible. She understood that her daughter's new expression didn't just appear out of nowhere, someone taught her it. The Duchess asked her if it was Mr. Darren, to which she received an affirmative answer. Then she asked what was wrong with Lady Mello, and the little girl answered that she was afraid of her, just like she was afraid of her brother. Catherine decided to be cunning and asked if she wanted to not go to school anymore. Then she wouldn't have to see her, but she wouldn't see Mr. Darren anymore either. The Duchess decided that she had never seen a more noble person than Mr. Darren, although he sometimes even looked a bit like an emperor. She asked the little girl if she hated all her brothers, to which she received a positive answer. Catherine thought, she needs to get the school principal to recognize her little girl so that she can be respected. So they agreed that tomorrow she would definitely go to school again. However, this required some cunning, so she headed a little earlier to Lady Mello, not empty-handed. The old woman was offended that she was being offered a bribe, although the Duchess said it was for the children's snack. She just wanted to ask her to take care of Haniel so that she wouldn't be bullied by children anymore. At this moment, Selina's biggest concern was that Catherine would not bring her daughter again. She even asked how this would end for them, since the Emperor could not show his patience all the time. Then Catherine tried to involve her in her plans. She said that she wanted to change the little girl's attitude towards her older brother. And for this she went to extremes, but she does not want to tell the whole story of her plan. She asked the duck to trust her. The next day she went to the Emperor's palace again, alone again. He asked why she didn't bring her daughter, and Catherine gathered her strength to answer him. She asked him to come with her, then he would be able to understand everything. The Emperor decided to clarify whether perhaps she was not bringing her daughter because she wanted to be alone with him. When they finally arrived, she invited him to come see what was going on. She had arranged for Lady Mello to do something for her beforehand. This was precisely what the bribe was for, but the Emperor noted that the white swan looked rather dejected. He thought that her daughter would come if she whistled, but she had a completely different goal. But she was still irritated when the Emperor said that she did not look very friendly. She became even more angry when he said that today this little bird would simply fall down dead at the sight of him. She tried to convince the Emperor, quite sure that he was mistaken about himself. Then she said that maybe he was afraid that he could scare the bird half to death. She said that after today her little girl would definitely stop being afraid of him. He just needed to show a little patience. Catherine suggested a bet. He decided that he had nothing to lose anyway. He needed to resolve the dispute as quickly as possible. Then she suggested that he rehearse how he would behave with her before the real meeting. And her daughter will be able to trust him. He will not seem like such a monster to her. She suggested that he learn one simple technique. To do this, he did not need to press but only lightly touch the birds so as not to harm them or frighten them. However, if he feels that he cannot win them over, he just needs to relax. The Emperor did not understand at all why this was necessary, but he decided not to retreat. She asked him if he could handle it, to which he replied that he understood everything perfectly. After that, she suggested that he start practicing, but he could not even imagine what she had in mind. So he decided that that was enough, for today he felt strange about the feelings he experienced next to this woman. He wanted to stop everything, but at that moment a goose headed towards them. When he met her gaze, he felt that something was wrong. It even seemed to him that it was not a bird, but a person. However, Catherine hurried him and asked him to do what she explained to him. At this moment, the goose was approaching him too close. He couldn't even understand what she wanted to do. After this, something unexpected happened. She stopped right in front of him and bowed her head to him, as if recognizing him as her emperor. He knew what he had to do, but he stopped in a kind of stupor. After that, he reached out his hand and stroked her head, despite all the strangeness of what was happening. After that, he decided that this bird was indeed smart, and Catherine noted that not every knight was awarded such an honor. After this, the bird turned away and left, and the emperor decided that that would be enough for today. However, Catherine said that now it was her turn. She had no intention of running away from him. He needed to stand aside and check what would happen next. She shouted loudly to the little girl that her mother had arrived. The gloomy cygnet suddenly came to life, clicked its beak, and began to rejoice. After that, he ran up to her, radiating the sublime happiness that only creatures close to each other can experience. Catherine picked her up in her arms and started hugging her. She loved these hugs very much. The baby reciprocated her feelings, and the emperor saw that birds really can be smart and become attached to people. However, he understood that he had lost his argument. Nevertheless, this scene made him feel touched. But at the same time, she made him think about a lot of things. He still couldn't understand the character of this woman. She looked into my eyes and said that she wasn't lying. It really is true. You just need to love the kids. Haniel showed her mother the treat Lady Mello had given her. She said that the other children were not given any. Only Haniel received it. The rest were given carp cut into pieces. At the same time, the lady praised Haniel right in front of everyone. This was another part of their agreement with Catherine. Looking at her, the Duchess felt a little upset because she remembered the expression on her brother's face. Their looks were so similar, they contained a fleeting happiness that immediately disappeared. After that, she asked what Haniel understood from Lady Malou's training. She probably said not only that she was a real lady, but also that she needed to behave well with her older brother. The little girl also asked if her brother hadn't left yet. Maybe he was still here. Catherine reassured her, but said that she needed to learn to communicate with her brother. The Duchess put her on the floor and asked her if she had seen her little brother talking to her strict teacher. After that, she said that she also needed to learn not to be afraid of her brother, because if he didn't love her, he wouldn't have come to her school to see her progress. After that, she asked if she could meet him at least once. At that moment, they heard some noise. Catherine told the nanny to take the baby into the house, and she went to see what was going on. If her stepdaughters had come here, they would have simply broken down the door and would not have hidden. However, no one else came here. No one even knew the way there, so she decided that I had misheard. But then she heard a voice behind her saying that she shouldn't be so fearless. Somehow she didn't fall from fear, but they held her. She felt a gloved hand on her waist. The emperor said that coming alone was rather reckless. He was very close to her, practically picking her up in his arms, but she suddenly thought that he was angry with her. She was afraid that he wanted to do something bad to her, but she immediately began to assure him that he would fulfill all his promises. He said that he was not holding her back, so she could leave whenever her heart desired. However, they can continue the conversation if she is okay with it and is still not scared. After this, Catherine said that she had good news. Her baby had softened so much that she could take her to the palace next time. She said that white swans are quite shy, but she seemed to be able to calm her down. The emperor ran his hand over her cheek. He had come to feel again that rare feeling that he had not been able to experience before. Catherine was startled because the touch made her blood run wild, but he had already removed his hands, leaving her somewhat confused. After that, he said that she had fulfilled his request. Then he had only to wait until the next day. She touched her cheek where he had just held his hand, not expecting him to praise her. After which, she happily announced that she had won their argument. She had proven that birds can be very smart. It was a pity that he did not stay until the end, but he replied that he was there. Catherine replied that it was even better that way. Otherwise, if she lost, she would have nothing to offer him. He replied that she was wrong to think so, since he knew what he wanted. At this time, Rebecca was reporting to her older sister in the main castle. Rana said that this was certainly good and that she could now relax, but her sister was worried about the ruined dress. The Duke's eldest daughter just laughed and said that if she had no money, she would just have to tell her sister, or she wanted her fiancé to return. Rebecca turned pale at these words, but she said that she had watched her stepmother until the end and had not noticed anything strange. Rania was amazed. Was it really true that nothing unusual was happening? Rebecca replied that she only went to the lake a few times a day, spending time there with the ducks. After that, she said that she did not understand why the emperor would meet with this woman. Rebecca said that even after sunset she hid behind the villa, no one came out from there. However, Rania heard that His Majesty had recently invited the Duchess to the palace. In fact, none of the nobles entered this palace, not even Rania herself. No one received an official invitation. However, for some reason their stepmother was invited. There must be something behind this. Rania noted that she would pay as much as was needed in money and jewelry, but she would not tolerate lies, even from her own sister. At this time, a conversation was taking place between two brothers in the emperor's castle. The emperor asked whether he had brought the one requested, to which he received an affirmative answer. He also reported that the second brother is currently engaged in state affairs and is also trying to track down their little sister with the help of secret sources. The emperor noted that the countess, Kirill's wife, was probably very angry with him. Now his brother was busy solving his issues, and besides, their marriage ceremony was carried out in a simplified manner. He and the countess had a good relationship, but it could have deteriorated. The emperor added that if the countess behaved inappropriately, she would be punished. He then said that they would hold a proper wedding ceremony for the countess once the state mourning for their parents was over. However, the younger brother was against it. He believed that the emperor should marry first. He asked if everyone else had resigned themselves to the fact that they would never be able to marry. At the same time, the emperor noted that such a possibility existed, after which he asked to invite wizards. This answer shocked his little brother, but the emperor called him back and told him to attend to the affairs of state. When he was irritated, his brothers were sure that he had not been subjected to any hoarding. Peyton also calmed down immediately after the emperor shouted menacingly at him and turned away to the window. At this time, the Duchess was heading to her baby's older brother. Haniel was always afraid that her older brother would hit her or get angry with her. Catherine replied that then she would hit him harder and become even more angry with him. The little girl began to tell various fables. She was afraid that he would eat her. Catherine decided that she had too low an opinion of her brother. If she didn't want to, Mom could go alone. The baby didn't want to leave her, so she agreed. At some point, she seemed to become completely weak and felt sick. Catherine decided that they needed to return home first, but the emperor had already appeared before them. He asked if they had changed their minds halfway through, and she didn't know what to answer. She wanted to bow, but the emperor told her not to bother herself with unnecessary ceremonies. At the same time, the Duchess noted that not only Haniel, but also she felt heavy at heart. But she told him that she was trying very hard to do his will. He objected that he did not order her to do this. His voice sounded hoarse, and she didn't understand what was happening. He didn't explain anything. He just turned around and walked away in the other direction. Catherine put her hand to her face and thought that perhaps she had not felt enough warmth from him that time when he touched her, because there had been no hug or kiss. Back then, it was just a light touch on her cheek that caused a storm of emotions in her. She broke out of her memories and called out to him. He asked what had happened again. Catherine replied that she had brought him her real daughter, as she had promised. She called her by the name Rana. They avoided Haniel's real name so as not to reveal themselves. Haniel herself was neither alive nor dead. She was ready to give up the ghost. She was hiding under the wings. The emperor noticed that Catherine said that her baby had softened. So what was the matter? At first, the Duchess thought it was because they were heading to his house. However, she asked the little girl what the problem was, and she replied that she was afraid of her brother's sword. Catherine asked to put away his weapon for a moment, and it was that very blade. She asked if he took it with him to the imperial palace when he visited his little sister. He replied that of course it was always with him. When Catherine asked why he did this, the emperor replied that he thought she liked the sword. When Catherine asked if he came up with it himself, he said that his brother Peyton advised him to do so. The younger brother said that the people would appreciate it if he always carried a sword with him, so he did so, since he was not particularly good at understanding people. Catherine realized that the first and fourth brothers were excluded from the list of people who wanted to harm her baby. And after that, she said that the blade really does look impressive, but it scares the children. The emperor replied that his sword possessed the power of the gods and that on the entire continent he alone could use it. Catherine noted that even she was shuddering at the sight of him, so the emperor took him off. It was quite unexpected, but he decided to put it aside. He asked her if the little girl was still scared after he had thrown away such a treasure just to please her. Catherine thought that this might be the only chance to bring her baby closer to her brother. When he asked if there was anything else that prevented her from perceiving him normally, she noticed the brooch on his shoulder. He said it was given to him by his late mother's family when he took the throne, and his uncle, a great wizard, put a protective spell on it. When she said that it looked a little out of place, he immediately took it off and threw it away, just like the sword before. She turned to her little girl and said in a language only they both understood that her brother was not scary at all. He was ready to change. The emperor noted that he had the feeling that she was hiding behind her daughter in order to express personal dissatisfaction. She replied that it was not so. She would not care even if he was naked here. However, she looked at him and realized that she was being rather disingenuous, since the emperor was distinguished by his particular beauty. Catherine didn't know how she would have reacted in a similar situation, and she thought it was a good thing she hadn't said it out loud. He asked why she suddenly blushed. She realized that he noticed any changes in her face. She thought to herself that at first she had been quite afraid of him, but now she liked watching him. The emperor invited her to sit in the gazebo, and she happily agreed. He asked how close he could get to her and her baby, and she knew Haniel wasn't ready for that yet. She sat down at some distance from him, and when asked whether she would seat her daughter, she replied that she would keep her with her. Catherine noted that the baby has a very difficult time adjusting to unfamiliar environments, which can always be frightening for birds. She replied that even when everything was fine, the baby only slept in her arms. At the same time, she noted that he does not pay attention to his facial expression. It notices her. The Duchess decided to turn the conversation to his missing sister and asked her name. She expressed doubt that he might have yelled at her, but the emperor could not remember. He said that he probably didn't have any bad thoughts towards his sister. He answered negatively, but she didn't like his uncertain tone. Yet despite his impressive appearance, Catherine thought he couldn't even answer a simple question properly. This was her only chance to show her little girl that her brother was not scary. For this, she only needed to hear from him that he did not intend to scare her. She asked him to think carefully whether he wanted to scare his little sister when he came to her. He said that of course he didn't want to do it, but she still always cried when she saw him. Catherine asked, but he didn't want to make her cry. He answered, "Of course not." She decided to ask him. After all, he didn't hate her. Maybe he could answer this question accurately. Having received a positive response, she was very happy that the ice had finally been broken. The emperor did not understand why this could be important. He still did not understand the essence of the issues. After this, Catherine asked if he was excited when he came to see his little sister, to which he replied that he was not that excited. She then said that the princess most likely did not understand that he had no evil intent, so she was very afraid of him. After that, she said that it was time for her to fix it. She picked up Haniel and put her on the table. She asked her if she had heard her brother, and then suggested that they go down. She was trembling and kept trying to return to her mother, not wanting to go near her brother. Persuasion had no effect on her. She was unable to take a single step. But she tried to overcome herself. Although she was only 3 years old, what could be expected of her? The emperor extended his hand towards her, remembering how Catherine had taught him to touch lightly. The baby still managed to take her first steps. She was ready to do anything for her mother. She almost reached him, but then immediately turned around and ran back. Catherine was very proud of her daughter. For the first time, she was able to overcome herself and do everything right. However, the emperor at that moment sat upset. He was upset that the bird was so afraid of him. Catherine didn't think she could feel so sorry for him, but she actually felt that emotion. But then, looking at his frowning face, she realized that she was about to laugh and decided to cover her mouth with her hand. He asked her if she really found it that funny, but she said that she wasn't laughing at all. The emperor told her quite demandingly to turn her head towards him, but Haniel at that moment felt threatened and decided to protect her. She ran up to him and began to peck at his hand, and both noted that she was no longer afraid of him. This scene simply touched Catherine. Even being such a rude, indifferent person, he was able to make her feel grateful to him. He asked that since the bird came to him first, it means everything is okay now. At that moment, her little daughter stubbornly pecked the emperor's hand, but she presented it as a gesture of friendship. She decided to continue the conversation and asked if he had not been interested in the princess. He would hardly have come to visit her. He gave her a positive answer, after which she breathed a sigh of relief. They looked so cute together, both with bright red eyes, one big man of incredible beauty and a small, beautiful swan. He asked her to peck some more, she refused, and Catherine thought that there was no need to be so blunt. After that, Haniel returned to her, and Catherine tried to bring the conversation to the point that it was not only about making friends with the swan, there were more important things. He said that he understood what she was talking about, and also noted that he was already working on it. The emperor even pulled out her chair so that she could stand up, showing incredible gallantry. This behavior made Catherine blush again, which the emperor could not help but notice. She noted that today's meeting went quite well. She could not even imagine that she would be able to bring her daughter to him, and they would be able to become friends. The emperor asked if she was really happy with all this, to which he received a completely affirmative answer. After which he asked if children were the only things that mattered to her in life, if she had no other interests. She understood that every day she woke up half human, half bird. She was a widow, and her life was not the sweetest, but nevertheless, she liked everything. Catherine answered the emperor sincerely, so he decided to clarify what exactly she found good in life. She said that she has a house from which she will not be thrown out. She can admire the most beautiful lake every day, and also that the acquaintance with her daughter went wonderfully. The Duchess was truly grateful for everything that was happening to her now. She knew how to appreciate the little things. He asked her to continue, but in her head she thought that she would be happy when she broke up with this rude man and came home. She was happy that soon her baby would leave her arms and become a real princess, but she couldn't say it out loud. The baby was now next to her, but they did not know that a crazy test awaited them ahead, which would reveal the truth about the emperor's behavior and his attitude towards his younger sister.